Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're here on YouTube and you'd like to see, if you want to be part of the conversation, you have to travel through the link down below to Makana, but via Zoom. So if you go to Zoom, then go to Makana, and then you can ask questions and chat and everything else. And so definitely check that out. If you'd like to join the panel, we'd love to have you. This panel is constantly building, constantly changing and evolving based on who shows up. And all you have to do to be here is to have good internet, good audio, good video, and show up here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and make sure that we can do a mic check. So once we start the mic check, we're done. That's as big as the panel is going to get. If you're not sure if you're ready for the panel, if your tech is ready, you can get here as early as 6 o'clock. So 6 o'clock is when we open the doors. Mostly just filled with a lot of chit chat and some tech testing. So if you want to test your system for this or for even other things, if you just want to see how it's working, there's a lot of really great people here at 6 a.m. That will give you honest feedback, whether you want it or not, and tell you how you're doing. First hour is all Q&A, open Q&A. It can be anything around media production. So it can be visual effects, media production, virtual production. All those questions are fair game. And this whole show lives on basically your questions. So it's really important for you to ask them, write them down between shows, put them in here, and we'll keep on working together to learn more. The second hour is something specific, and we send that out. Once you've signed up, we'll send that out to you every day. You'll get what's coming up next, so you can check it out there. Today, we have Shannon Cooper. I've worked with Shannon for almost a decade, and she has done an enormous amount among many other things. She's done an enormous amount of participant prep, and we were talking about virtual events, and she is integral to my team to put this stuff together. And part of what she does is make sure that the guests all look good. So she's going to talk a little bit about what that process looks like and answer your questions about participant prep. We consider that pretty much the secret sauce to a good virtual event. Is actually probably the most important part, is making sure that the participants who are going to be speaking are, look and sound good and are really ready for the event. So she's going to talk a little bit about that today. And we had a good movie night last night. We'll do that again in a couple weeks. We all got together and watched a little bit of episode 1 and did a lot of figuring out that Teleparty or Netflix Party is a little rough. So anyway, we're going to figure out how to make all that work, but we'll be doing lots of other tests throughout the week. If you've got ideas for the second hours, definitely go into Discord and ask those. Put in suggestions, and most importantly, vote those suggestions up. You'll notice stuff that's in today that was voted on and suggested as recently as last week. So definitely, I go through that as I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do for second hours. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Okay, and we start today with A. Mitchell's from Washington, and he says, what happens in 7 days? Anything special planned? And I believe that's a reference to the fact that we hit Office Hours episode 300.
Wow, 7 days? That's in 7 days?
That's in 7 days.
Oh, 300, but not 365. Well, 300. We may have to celebrate it on Sunday night or something. I'm not going to actually be here. I can be here for the first hour. No. Next week is going to be rough. So I probably, maybe Sunday night we'll do something.
Well, just remember, we're international, so it's the day before elsewhere.
Exactly. So there you go. 300 days, the 300th episode. So we'll look at maybe Sunday late, maybe earlier than the 8 o'clock that we did the last one.
We'll call it 300 Eve.
I can do it anytime on Sunday now because the Steelers lost. so now that my football schedule is now cleared, until next year. So anyway, we'll take a look at maybe doing something. I don't know what we would do, but I think we should talk about it. Maybe we'll have maybe we should just use Sunday morning as the
special hats.
Special hats. Yeah, exactly. I think that we'll use Sunday mornings we'll do a special Sunday evening where we just talk about the last 300 days. I think that'd be fun. Sunday morning will be what it is, but Sunday evening will be like a retrospective.
Well, maybe it should be a meeting, and we get 300 people on. We have they've all been mic tested, and we have 300 people in a meeting.
And we'll have somebody come in and
try
talk
to have
about hybrid
conversation.
events. We'll have someone come in and then one of us will kick them and go, "This is Sparta," and then we'll push them off into a hole. Anyway, next question.
I'll get right on that animated GIF immediately. That's getting memed right there.
There you go. Next question comes from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, often on the panel here and here today. I keep hearing that red is the hardest, most difficult color to compress for digital video. Why is it the hardest? What makes red so special compared to, I believe, blue and green is what he meant.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, a long time ago, somebody decided that the Y part of the YUV would be mostly combined from the red and green pixels coming off the tube, going back to the tube eras. And so there's 4 samples or a lot more detail available to the green and blue channels than there is to the red. Red kind of has to sit out there all by itself and produce its own little color without the advantage of having the 4 samples over having to be made up from the 2 and the 2.
Yeah, and so and red and any primary color generally will have some trouble with compression. So if you have a red, green, or blue, and it's a very, very pristine red, green, or blue, a saturated red, green, or blue, all of them will compress somewhat badly. It's just that the one that people seem to use the most is red, and the compression tends to beat it up very, the way that compression works, it tends to, because of what Roscoe talked about, the subsampling or the undersampling, tends to just destroy the red channel when you compress it. Go ahead, Bill.
And I'm going to go back to the ancient days of analog video. If you dubbed a VHS tape to another one, one of the first things you'd notice as the signal just fell apart real fast was a red halo around stuff or a red fringe switch. So there were practical reasons where everybody said red is the worst part of this signal.
Yeah, so every time we have someone with, and we even have a little red in the 090 logo, but anytime you see someone with a red logo, you're like, oh, sorry about that. It means all your logos will not look great online. Go ahead, Roscoe.
And in film, red looks great because the sampling is there. It's chemical.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Moving on to Brian Anderson of Silver Springs, Maryland, and the panel. Last night, I was using my TV as a second screen for my laptop. When connected to my Denon AVR receiver over HDMI, I had 5:1 sound. 5.1 sound. When using my Apple TV to wirelessly gain a second monitor, I only had LCR audio. I have an older Apple TV HD silver remote. Would an Apple 4K give me better surround audio?
Go ahead, Grant, and then Jason.
I would not think so. I wouldn't think that getting the newer one would give you more of the multi-channel. I think you're getting the multi-channel because it's the Mac is seeing the embedded audio. That's sending back to the Mac and saying, hey, he's got 6 discrete channels there, and it can send it through, or which it can either process in the Mac or just send the raw through to the AVR, and then that's doing all the decoding. Whatever the wireless transmission is that happens over the sharing to the Apple TV, I do not think is full multi-channel support, but I'm guessing I don't think it would change.
Go ahead, Jason.
I think it depends largely on Apple's assessment or AirPlay 2's assessment of your network. This sounds strange, but I'm pretty sure that many networks will support AirPlay 2 with linear PCM audio, but not 5.1, but will support something like Atmos, what's it called? Atmos sound or Vision sound. Should it? I don't know. Not really, but yeah.
Yeah. So the one of the things about it is that it depends on what kind of content you're putting onto the machine. So when you say, I want to share this URL we were talking about this last night on the movie night with Colleen. By the way, it was amazing that Colleen Henry showed up for our little movie night. So anyway, when we were talking about this, but when you say, I want to watch this URL from my phone and you AirPlay it, it doesn't actually AirPlay. It doesn't transmit from your phone to Apple TV. It sends the manifest. It sends the description of where the video is over to the Apple TV, and then the Apple TV plays it locally. When you stream actually from your phone, as a screen share, then it's using AirPlay to screen share over. And those two, one would probably carry 5.1 and the other one will probably not. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, and when we were having that conversation last night, I was going, okay, they're talking about casting, but I wasn't casting. I was using Apple TV to create a second monitor for the laptop,
which would be
wirelessly.
Stereo.
That would be stereo.
If it sets up a second, it's only going to send stereo over that. If you had cast, it probably would. You'd probably see 5.1. So if you go to something that has surround and you cast from it to your Apple TV, you'll most likely get 5.1 because it's not actually getting the audio from your phone or from your mobile device. It's getting the audio from the original source. And so as a result, it'll be able to support it. Whereas when it's just streaming the phone, it's just sending over stereo. Go ahead, Jason.
It's also important to add to that the way that AirPlay and Google Cast work are kind of different. The handshake is different and the method. So the two cannot be used interchangeably. I think you both are right about what you're saying.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
So I don't have to spend money on Apple TV 4K. Thank you.
I would highly suggest it.
Of course you do.
You always do. I mean, you're in this group, so we all have lots of Apple TVs. All right, next question.
Moving on to TJ Asher's back with a second question from Minneapolis. On the latest edition of Twit, one of the guests kept sniffing or breathing into their headset microphone, and it became so distracting I had to quit listening. How could or should a situation like this be handled? I realize some folks have habits or ways of being that makes that type of thing involuntary, but how do you fix it?
Well, I mean, one of the big things, this is why having comms back to each person is really useful. And I'm not sure why Twit didn't take advantage of it, because they do have that. They can talk back to each person. Maybe Leo wasn't as sensitive to it as you were, but I think that that I do agree with you that becomes very distracting to have a lot of noise. A lot of times we're talking back to people through Zoom or through Skype or whatever and going, hey, you're making a lot of noise over there. And then a lot of times you try to pot them down. You try to move their audio down when they're not there, if they're going to do a lot of that. I think that the big thing as a host that you have to do is watch yourself be on air. And it's really painful as a host to be on air and watch yourself later, because you'll see all your tics and it drives you crazy. But there's things that I'm constantly working on, like getting rid of and all these pauses. I'm not 100% there, but you watching yourself makes it much more painful, much easier to do because you think about it all the time. Go ahead, Bill.
Same thing here. And I got to say that one thing that's amazed me is how much post-processing makes a difference in those errant sounds. And what I mean is I do so much voiceover that if I do a voiceover and I listen back and it's pretty clean, but when I apply compression to it, I will find that my intake of breath is just popped up crazily, and I have to go in carefully and suppress breaths in order to do that. So I'm not sure that, you might have been listening to Twit after some post-processing as opposed to the real-time stream, or it might have been the real-time stream, but just be wary of that.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there's only really two ways to deal with that. One is to tell the person and make them self-conscious about it, and then that can be a problem because then they stop breathing. But the other way is to noise.
So much hard to be. It's really hard to be a useful guest
really have
on
to
a show if
speed up
you're not breathing. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other way is to noise gate it on downstream from them, and that of course comes with its own artifacts, and you got to set the gate level just right to just clip out the little snorts or sniffles and leave their voice once it breaks a certain level.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Lars Svensson is in from Tottenhatten, Sweden, and says he's a new user from there. In our municipality, the management is convinced that hybrid meetings are the way forward. I know it will cost a lot, be time-consuming, and generally laborious. Do you have any tips or advice on how I can persuade them not to take that path?
Go ahead, Jason.
Be as loud as you can right now and as vocal right now so that you can say, I told you so, and they can't walk it back.
I mean, some things are when I'm not being, you can really see like if I'm passive aggressive, I will say, we'll return to this email later. Like we'll return to this email after this fails. I have not quite said it that bluntly, but a lot of times I'll lay out some ideas of things that I'm pretty sure of, and then say, we may have to come back to this email as reference, or when we get to that other side. but sometimes you just let people, you know what they say is I'm not going to say it anyway. So there's but sometimes they're just lessons that are required, you know. And the hard part is people think that the hybrid works because they're in the room and they go, hey, that worked just fine, you know, like that. So what we really saw quickly was when COVID began, what we really saw was that people realized how bad their conference rooms were because they weren't in them. So as soon as they were looking at speakerphones and they were like, oh no. And they're like, how long has it been this way? And a lot of us were like, yeah, the last decade, we couldn't understand anything you were saying. We were like doing everything we could to hear you. So, you know, we were, so a lot of times when they're sitting in the room in the hybrid, that's the thing that we noticed. I mean, as I've said before, I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hybrid events. It's not that I'm saying that they don't work because I'm theorizing it. I'm saying they don't work because we did them. We did everything we could to figure it out. And what we noticed, there's different layers of failure. The part that was really, when you look at active listening, that is the part that is just brutal, that people just turn off when they're in the back. They're basically, everybody's in the back of the room. And they're kind of, I always just tell people that you're putting everybody online in the kids' table. they're like way off in the corner. They're not even at the table. They're off in another corner, kind of listening to the table. You can try to interact with them. You go over, hey, how's it going? How's the turkey? And that's what it's like to have a hybrid event, is all the online folks get shoved off into the corner, because it's impossible as a human being not to pay attention to the people that are in front of you. You know, you just think that you can pay attention. You think that you can do both, but you don't. Like they just don't. I don't. You know, and so, and I think that it's really, really hard to not look at human beings in the room and engage with them as first person. And so as a result, you know, we strongly recommend, there's a reason to just stream stuff so that people can kind of sit in the back, but we're all about all virtual or all in room. And right now, all virtual, because you pull the audience in way tighter than you would pull them in if they're in a hybrid. Stuart, Grant, and then Leo.
Lars, tomorrow, go to the YouTube page. There will be annotations on the YouTube for today's answer to that question. Give the time code of that YouTube to your client and make them watch it.
I think there was another one that I probably was more succinct about, that was someone used earlier too. They asked me for permission. I don't remember where it was, where I really got into it. Grant and then Leo.
It's interesting. One of the things I was going to say is that we've spoken about it a lot on office hours. And what's interesting about that is that I haven't heard, or maybe it hasn't sunk in from you, Alex, saying about the back row, because what we say with virtual events is that everyone has a front row seat.
Yep.
And so that comparison is very strong to say that to go to a hybrid, you think that you're gaining, but actually you're pushing all of those people to the back.
Yep.
And then the second part of it is that a big thing that we fight is that people still believe that those live events of yesteryear were awesome. And so they still think that's what we want to get back to. And so if we have to do something in between, why wouldn't we? We still want to get people in a room, and then, and we can live stream and all those people, and now we're all together. And of course, it just doesn't work.
And again, so I came from I guess what I would say is I'm exactly where people who are talking about hybrids, I was there 8 years ago, not 7 or 8 years ago, where I was just like, this is it. We're going to have a room with 100 people, and then we're going to have cameras, and we're going to bring people in, and they're going to have a great conversation. We're going to merge the people in room, and we're going to merge the folks out of room, and we're going to, and I imagined all these, and we got to do them, and we got paid a lot of money to do these events where we took, CEOs for really big companies, put them into a room with 100 people, 150 people, built it all in a circle so that it would pull everybody together, then bring comments in from online. And we had great cameras and short depth of field. I mean, way more than what people are talking about. I mean, $250,000, $300,000 budgets, to do these hybrid events. And when you actually watch the stream as a stream, it's fine. It was good. As a actual conversation and incorporating people, it was a disaster. It wasn't worth doing. And that's when I really got, like, if I can have all the money in the world and I can have someone that everybody wants to talk to, and I put people in there and it's not successful, I don't know how to do that. Go ahead, Leo.
So the first thought in my mind is this is very similar to the discussions I had with some people about 3D TV. It's like 3D, we've got to do everything in 3D. And we did stuff in sport in 3D, and it just never, ever worked. And there's always this view that technology will solve every problem. And in a way it will, and in a way it won't. But the thing I would always counter on this one, and I've had before, is that I think there is certain cases where hybrid has to happen. And houses of worship in particular are one where I'm like, it has to happen. We have to have hybrid in houses of worship, because we have to provide a service to some people that are in the room and some people that are not.
But I guess the question is do we have to do both of them at the same time? You already have, like, for a lot of these things, do we really need to have and again, you can stream it and people can watch it, but when I look at my wife, who listens to some version of a spiritual talk almost every waking minute. It's like, whether it's Buddhist or Christian or whatever, there's, like, she's awake and there's people talking in the background about something. And the thing is that she's not listening to the songs or the other things. She's listening to the sermons, And so the thing is that I don't know, she doesn't need to be there. And he could have done that it would have been nice if he had done it with a good mic, like the bad audio. So anyway,
I mean things like, when you've got weddings, bar mitzvahs, funerals, life cycle events, you have to have a hybrid. That's where I think you're going to need it.
Possibly. Go ahead, Jason.
I would say, to put it succinctly, the reason that an online only thing is superior is because it forces everyone, from the CEO to, the person that just tuned in, to have exactly the same experience, which means nobody can have the wrong, or a completely different experience because they were in a different conference room. The reason that office hours works is because all of us make it work, and it's very clear if something's going to fail or succeed, to us and to people that are just watching. And that's, that's the magic. Whereas with a hybrid experience, it is impossible to have the same experience corporeally as well as virtually. It just can't be done.
Go ahead, Fenwick.
Since COVID, my wife and our family's been watching a church service every Sunday morning from North Carolina. It's called Elevation Church. In the beginning, they obviously no audience, and they brought all the cameras closer. And by the way, it's an amazing broadcast. They brought all the cameras closer. It's on YouTube, and they put big screens up so that the pastor could interact with, like, the chat forums and stuff like that. Probably about 15 feet away, 20 feet away. In the last month and a half, they've slowly started to let more and more people in, to the point where now there's enough people on the floor. It's an 1,800 seat arena or room. There's enough people on the floor. They've had to push the cameras and the monitors back, and they've done an amazing job at not changing the experience for the online people. And in some ways it's better because there is a little audience. I've been thinking about, you can't do hybrid every time I watch it over the last month and a half. And it's been very interesting. And I think that my takeaway is the guys had almost a year to practice, just like we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the
I
people
think
that have taken advantage of this time will do better.
I do think that the place that you can get to some success or some mediation of the process is that you can, if you treat it like a broadcast that people are showing up for, you're much better off. I mean, if you watch the Oscars or you watch other things like that, that is a broadcast that people attend. And I think that if you're going to do a hybrid, it has to be that. It is for the online audience, and the other people get to come, get to show up. And I think that, that's the part that I think a lot of people miss too. Courtney and then Sky.
Yeah, I think it greatly depends on the content of the event. There are some events that work well hybrid and don't work at all, as evidenced by the late night shows. If you noticed, when we went to COVID, they went to their garages or attics,
and had no audience. It was very dead. The comedy was very flat. But now when they moved partially back into the studio and had the writers and just a few skeleton crew and few people there to react to the what was being said, it changed immensely and was so much better with some reaction in the room, so that the timing of the person delivering gets that immediate response. And if you're looking at
Well,
an extreme event, an immediate response will help carry it and make it much more watchable, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess we've done a bunch of events where we do that with Zoom, where we give them 25, 50, 100 people to look at virtually. And we found that was pretty effective when executed well. Sky, Stephen, and Grant, real fast, because we took a long time on this.
To your point about a history, with regards to doing that thing 8 years ago, when the audience wasn't used to this as a consumption habits, our consumption habits have been modified. And to Courtney's point of evolution of things, we are now modifying as a consumer how we receive that information. So I'm wondering if you were just ahead of your time 8 years ago, and now that the audience has used to gallery views.
I will say that I think that conversations like the one we're having here, if this becomes more prevalent among other vertical interest groups, no one's going to want to watch something passively or for very long. It's just that that's the thing that I think is going to happen. Stephen, and then Grant.
Yeah, one of the things you have to look at is this a many to many type, rumble, or is it really just a few to many? And I think that's where most corporate stuff is. It's these 4 people are talking to everybody else.
It is. It's just that you don't need everybody else in there,
That's right.
And the thing is that it makes it difficult to do, expensive and difficult to put all those cameras in, whereas I can send these like what we're seeing here. Again, I've said this before, this group right now would be impossible to shoot in a room. Well, like it would just be a bunch of cameras and a bunch of cacophony, and you wouldn't be able to do it. So we can have a conversation that is bigger than anything we could have on stage. Anything more than about 6 or 8 people on stage, 6 people on stage becomes difficult. Anything more than that just becomes this mess, And so being able to have this kind of group session where we're talking about this is not possible in the real world. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I just think that the nomenclature is very important as we go forward, because when we talk about live events, we all understood what that meant. It meant that you could engage, you could put your hand up, you could clap, you could whatever. And then we talk about virtual events, and we're like, okay, so we're doing this and we're getting all this engagement and stuff. And then we're like, okay, so we just join the two. And not all events that are online and in person should be called hybrid events, because the expectation of the audience interaction isn't necessarily the same. And so in the example that was said about church services, and it needs to be hybrid, I disagree. I agree that it does need to be broadcast so that people that cannot get in person can access it. But I don't agree that we call that hybrid and expect that those 2 different audiences are having a similar experience. They are not going to be experiencing it in the same way. So let's not call it hybrid in that instance. It's okay to do a live event and broadcast it, and for the back row, and they're happy and they'll keep doing their thing. And then if we do want to do a so-called hybrid, then we're doing it in a very different way, and the online audience is the key audience.
Yeah, and we've had this situation like with artists, that they want to have a handful of people in the room, and we're always like, if you just pay attention to the screen, if we make that screen bigger and you just pay attention to them, the online audience, and we see the average view time skyrockets. You put an artist in front of a camera, if they can get into it, and give them a big zoom window, and now you have everyone just locked in, because they're part of it, they're being sung to, and once you get used to that, after working on a bunch of those shows, I can't even go to concerts anymore. Like literally can't go to a show because it seems so far away, like there's 500 people or 5,000 people. And I after working in the music industry, I stopped. You get used to watching bands with 300 people, and for industry events, and I couldn't really adjust to more than about 700 or 800 as it is. And I don't go to stadium shows or anything else, but there is something about that band. And I used to think that we would have it as a hybrid where we'd have a handful of cameras, like MTV Unplugged is very cool. But I think the next generation is, MTV plugged, which is just, completely, virtual, and not have other people that are part of that, and being able to have that conversation. And we weren't able to do that until now. And I think that the kind of conversations we had with Daria Musk and with Peter Hillman and with Brian Vander Ark are things that we're going to reproduce more of this year. But I think that kind of show, they didn't play that much music, but it was super compelling because it was something that we got to know them, in a way that we don't get to know from a concert. Anyway, next question.
Talak Miguel Lopez Waterman from Bonita Beach, Florida, is in with a small follow-up to a question I had during the education hour, specifically thinking about a mobile remote teaching setup. My day job as a lighting designer requires a lot of travel, even in these pandemic times. Is there a fold-up background that you all like?
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I put two links in. One is the one I just put back up behind me, which is a bar across the back with a curtain hanging down. And the other ones are the ones that, literally twist in. They're like putting into your car, a shade thing into your car. You twist it up into a small thing. I think for a lot of traveling, the twist up one with the shade, but they don't come in huge sizes, which you may not want or need.
The one that a lot of us use is the Lazalite 6 foot by 7 foot. I will say it's hard to fly with. It's relatively easy to drive with. But the Lazalite, that's the one that a lot of us use. The slightly smaller ones are easier to pop up, but you have to be the 6 by 7. You can put it behind you and it works everywhere, and you can it'll just set on its own weight, and it stretches out. Doesn't have any wrinkles. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm gonna promote the idea that flying or traveling is hard, even with the medium big ones, as Alex talking about. You will note that they use that same technology of a spring and then a circular form of some kind to do even tents for camping that are significantly bigger than the ones we use. So it's possible to get bigger and bigger, but once you get past something that will not work for a background like the one I have behind me, which is a pop-up, then they will not go well into luggage, and it's just more of a hassle than you want to deal with. So there's a limitation on pop-up backgrounds. So one person.
I didn't think about using technology with loops. Anyway, next question.
Yeah, moving on to A. Mitchell's of Washington. With Yamaha's ESDC online event also running this week, are there any sessions people are especially excited about there? Immersive audio, room augmentation, treatments, device monitoring, networking, Dan Dugan's hour, and so forth.
I would love to say that I knew it was happening, but I didn't. so I'm not excited about it yet. I'm now excited about it. I don't, let's see here. Maybe you can put a link in to, I did a search for it and I still don't see it. So obviously the promotion of the event leaves something to be desired, because it's, I can't even find it when I do Yamaha ESDC. So maybe you can put that in the chat and we'll come back to it, but I think it's great. I'd love to see what they're doing. I didn't know it was happening. Next question.
Next question comes for us from Rebecca Getz-Keller of Allentown. I finally got my Lazalite, yay, but I have it hung on a rolling clothing rack. How do I light it to avoid seeing the shadow from the two vertical bars showing through from behind?
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Use multiple light sources, like use a couple of panels behind it. That way they're spread out, so you're lighting more of the Laser light from behind.
I go the other direction, which is that I just add a blanket. So I have another blanket behind the Lazalite to block out all the. So I just want it to be flat, and the Lazalite has just a very little bit of translucency, which allows the sunlight to go through. So I find that another blanket behind it generally solves the problem. You might be better off also if you put the Lazalite up, against the wall, then you don't have as much. I have a window behind mine, so that I have to add a blanket. So a relatively cheap blanket from Target or Walmart is a nice and thick quilt, something like that, $20. You can put it behind that, and then you won't see anything. Next question.
David Brady of New York is in with, is the office hours stream encoded using the Zoom software encoder? Wondering why you prefer that versus a hardware encoder. And note for branding purposes, the Zoom watermark is my nemesis.
So the Zoom is the easiest way for us to do it, since we do it every day and we don't have a budget. It's an easy way to manage it. My plan in the next probably 6 weeks is to do some hardware investment. And so what I'm part of that investment will be kind of setting up for, I'm testing some Mac Mini M1s that we have laying around here to see if that's going to work. And if it does, I'll kind of put them in so that we can have a participant in the event that can give me a clean or a feed into a switcher and then stream out. So that'll be the first step that we do. I am considering doing that process eventually in AWS, and part of it is us just figuring out how to do it, like how to do it well. And I'm sure that there's people here like Grant and other people that could help me with that. So, but we may push it all into AWS. It's just that is going to be an ongoing cost. So I have to think about costs in that process. Well, I have a link. Well, that's the idea. I'll stream it from the link. So, but the goal was, I
just felt like I was in the gang because I could show that I had a link. That's
you got a link. You have the current link. So anyway, anyway, so the link is actually what I'm going to use in the beginning. So I'm going to take a participant video, run it through a switcher, and then run it into a link. And then I'm going to engage a couple people here to slowly take that over. The real problem is as we add more complexity, it means that I have more dependencies, and everybody here is doing this on their own time. So we're lucky to have the folks that are here regularly, Mickey and Bill and others, to constantly and usually. I mean, this is a good example. So Jeffrey isn't here today, so there won't be any notes immediately for the show. So as we add features, we just have to know how we're going to actually execute those features and how we do it ongoingly. Because as soon as we do it 3 or 4 days in a row, we've built an expectation. So and so then I get lots of emails about why it's not working today. So anyway, so that's the weight, and the reason we do it straight out of here is it's easy for us to set up. But we are looking at being able to stream it, screen grabbing. Part of that step was getting 1080p for the participants, and that was a key piece of that puzzle, so that we could have a participant that was getting 1080p, so that we could then do all the other things we want to do. So there's another reason to do it, which is that I want to eventually set it up where the second hour is when we're bringing in an artist is probably not everyone in the panel. Like when we're bringing somebody in that we're going to interview, we kind of shift gears and go to a 2-up or 3-up of that person and a handful of 1 or 2 other people, and it becomes a more focused thing for them. It allows us to put in graphics and 2-ups and just make the second hour something different. So there's a bunch of things that I have on the roadmap, but that's the reason we use Zoom is because it's easy to turn on and make it work. Next question
comes from Tony Tang in Chicago, who asks, does Zoom and other video conferencing software platforms use different video frame rates within the same meeting for participants from countries with 50 versus 60 hertz power supplies? For example, if 2 participants join from countries with different power standards, what frame rate is captured and seen by each person?
I think generally almost all online platforms will lean towards 30 unless you're supplying something less. So if you're supplying 25, it'll send 25. If you're supplying 30, it'll go to 30. What they all want internally tends to be 30. That tends to be if you're watching YouTube Live or Facebook Live, they're streaming in 30 frames a second globally. Like they're not, it's not they're not asking. So it's even if you do a Zoom that's all 25, what it's streaming to in YouTube, if it's streaming from Zoom, will be 30. And even if you captured it and put it some other way and then put it up there in 25 to no matter what you set the frame rate to YouTube, it still streams 30. Now it may archive that at 25, but it's going to stream it out live at 30. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, well, and remember too, so like I've got a 50 frames camera, but it's coming into the ATEM switcher and then coming out at 30. But of course, Zoom's doing a whole bunch of work. So at the moment, I'm looking at my stats now. I'm sending full 1080 frame, but only at 23, 24, 23, 24. So it's a live encode, right? And so it's changing anyway. So
and there's a buffer, so especially at 1080, Zoom is rarely 30 frames a second. I mean, it usually drops a little bit here and there. And so, because it's trying to keep up. Now, what's interesting is that your audio doesn't break up, because the audio, that's why we lose sync all the time, is the audio cannot break up. It cannot change. You cannot lose packets. And so audio comes out the same all the time. and then it does the best it can with the frames. Like it's like, oh, I'll send you as much video as I can. So that's kind of how that works. Next question.
Matt Cooley of Montreal, Quebec, Canada says, how do I calculate the right uninterruptible power supply to get for my vMix system with 3 big monitors and a router? He needs at least 10 minutes of power.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I would start with a neat little device that we covered pretty early in the office hours season called the Kilowatt, KILL-AWATT. Plug all the gear that you need into that one outlet, and it will measure amperage and voltage and measure it for 10 minutes, and it will keep track of the amperage and the voltage. And for those of you that don't know, amperage times voltage is wattage. There you go.
Mickey?
And yeah, exactly that equation that Jason mentioned. Though for me, I would look at the specs of the power supply of each device that you're plugging in instead of using a kilowatt, because with the kilowatt you would typically get your actual, like, say, running wattage as opposed to your peak wattage that each device can pull.
Yeah, Stuart.
When Jason's talking about a kilowatt, he means something like this that plugs in and does it. But one thing to remember is your inrush when you switch things on. There's a lovely story I could tell about a broadcast center that didn't take good care of figuring out how much that did, and every time they had a power bump, the UPS died because the UPS wasn't big enough. So take the amount that something like that shows you and add 50%.
Mm-hmm. Yep, go ahead, Leo.
So this is the first question that I've ever actually been qualified to answer on this, which is amazing, as I have qualifications in this, but I'm not even going to answer it technically. The price of UPSs has dropped so dramatically in my experience, and that you can bump up to the next one up or the next one up for virtually nothing. In fact, I bought one on Friday, a 950, and it was exactly the same price as the 700. So just be aware, it's actually the prices of these things are dropping so low that trying to be close to the line, you may find, unless you're going really big, that it isn't worth it.
I think more about the features of the UPS than, so I want to be able to have removable batteries. So I won't buy a UPS that doesn't have a removable battery. If I can't pull it out, because I want to be able to replace that battery. And if I want to ship it, I want to be able to flip the battery. So when we ship our 1500 volt amp, we flip the batteries, so that they don't, catch fire. And in general, while they're traveling or while they're not being used, we flip those batteries. Now I will admit, I think in increments of 1500. So I get 1500 volt amp. I buy one, and then when it gets to a point where it's at 50% load, buy another one. So and I just and you will not hit 50% load with what you're talking about here. You'll hit, probably, my guess is, if you buy one, let me know, but I bet you on a 1500 volt amp, you'll hit about 45%. 40 to 45% is probably where you'll hit with those. And what that means is you got plenty of time, that's on it. And so if things are really important, then we have generators as well. So, and the UPSs are designed to give us time to turn the generator on. And then the key is with anything is to unplug it and see what happens. Like, you'll always see us at the end of a build when we have all our stuff, is we'll go, okay, killing power. And what that means, we're pulling it out of the wall. And then we look at all of our monitors, and we look at everything else. And we look at any lights that turned off to make sure that no one plugged something into the wall or into something that they shouldn't have. So the other thing is thinking about power distribution and how you're going to do that. You're not really, you are protecting against power outage, but what you're really protecting against is momentary power loss. Something blinks, someone pulls the wrong thing out, something runs over your power line, like a forklift. Not that that's ever happened 2 or 3 times to me, is someone ran over the power, and on the forklift. Go ahead, Jason and Stuart.
Sorry, a bit of a waste of time. They make UPSs without removable batteries.
Oh, yeah.
Like that. Oh, yeah. That is frightening news to me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just one note on, well, actually, sort of 2 notes. Flipping batteries, make sure you have the contacts covered and no metal plate over the top of them, because the last thing you want to do is arc them.
Yep.
It is better. And the other thing is most electronic stores can get a replacement battery. So even if you ship the device, you can get the battery at the location, and that will be lighter on shipping. And one thought that just crosses the mind is don't forget that there is different UPSs, whether they have a clean output or whether they've got a fairly rough synthesized sine wave.
The last thing is that also know that this is not something that is transferable between countries if you're changing voltage. UPSs are 120 or they're 240, but they don't switch like most of our power supplies. Go ahead, Courtney, real quickly, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, well, a good consideration is in which when working mobily with teleprompters, you have to deal with this. But we don't use UPSs very much, except for anything that doesn't have a battery. Go to a laptop, a powerful enough laptop to run your vMix. Then even if your monitors go out, it'll drop back to, your image will drop back to your laptop monitor. You'll still be on the air, and as long as you have a UPS that's capable of handling the router and the modem or whatever doesn't have a built-in battery, the fallback system in a laptop is the best you're going to have, and you can go hours after the power goes out as long as you have the other stuff.
Yeah, we actually don't put that's the one thing we don't put on our UPSs is our laptops because we don't want to draw on the UPS for that. Next question.
Moving to Sound Mixer SF Jesse in San Francisco, who has, and I like this question, I want to be a farmer, a Zoom farmer. Pipeline workflow examples of audio video returns to Zoom rooms or meeting talent that is ISO'd. How interactive can these ISO people be with the main room Zoom session? Zoom farms. I like
You want
that.
to explain that, Farmer Jesse?
Yeah, sure. Well, got to go back to the organic life here, living digitally mostly. So trying to get my hands in some cables and adapters. So basically thinking about creating sort of Mac Mini or mini computer Zoom, either single meetings or rooms where I can ISO people. And how would I send like a program split to all those folks so that they can sort of keep track of the program? And is it possible for those people on their home machines to sort of be into Zoom sessions in a way to where I can capture their ISO audio and video, and they can also still interact with the main session and have all of the features of Zoom?
Yeah. So the way we've done that is that number one is the return that we send is usually a multi-view, and you can do that either generating that with something like vMix, or we just use hardware. So we use Blackmagic MV16s to do that because it just lets us just throw a bunch of windows up, and it can be 4x4, 9x9, 16x16. Or we can switch and just send them the whole program back. We then just tie another computer in. So we just incorporate them into a Zoom room joins a big meeting, and that becomes another participant that is cross-mixed to all of the ISO participants. So you have the panelists that are all, getting what they're getting. They're getting their own mix minus, but just another panelist is the Zoom meeting. At that point, anybody in the Zoom meeting can talk to them the same way they would talk to any of the panelists talking to each other. So it's the same ISO solution, except there's a meeting that is one of those participants. And that meeting, what it's getting is your program feed. It's getting the output of your switcher goes into that meeting, but what's coming out of it is it can be just another window in the 9 windows or 16 windows or 4 windows that the Zoom person is getting. Now, how detailed you make that is up to you. We started getting to the point where we're starting to add MVs for every room, every ISO participant, because then we could design what they saw for each person. But that is just a lot more hardware, but it does mean that you can customize what each person's getting as a return. And so that is, so you can have 4 up for one person and 16 up for another person. And you can design, and then your router is just routing whatever it needs to go into those 16, into that MB16 to send back to each person. So it seems like a lot of hardware, but what it does is it creates this kind of nice setup where everything just works. And the big thing is audio. It's just the mix minuses get complicated, but it's all, Dante out, Dante in, so on and so forth. Go ahead, Grant.
Jesse, what's the purpose of ISOing? You want to do a switch of that post production?
Yeah, screen scrape or screen grab in order to mix that independently in some other production software on a separate machine. Yeah.
Well, And the ISO, I mean, the ISO audio and being able to talk back to the folks and everything else becomes, I don't know, for us, it becomes just incredibly useful. You know,
Yeah, and I wasn't. I was just trying to understand, because you can still do that with everyone in the same meeting, and then having a separate machine that has each one of those people pinned. You know, as in one machine dedicated to pinning that person. And then that's doing a local record, which is taking that local audio, which will get an ISO, stem essentially of their own audio recording, and a full screen video of them. And so,
well, when you ISO them though, if you're not ISOing, if they're all in the same meeting, you're not going to get clean audio though. For post-production, you could, but not for live, right?
Yes. Correct. And that's why I was asking the distinction. If you're talking specifically about what you're getting in post-production, I mean, I would argue that you still have enough control in that meeting with them all together, that if you needed to quickly drag them out to do an adjustment and put them back in,
as someone who does ISO all the time, I'll argue that you can't go back. You can't go back to like mixed audio, because you're just like, oh my gosh, and Jesse has enough experience with our side of it that is, like you just able to talk to each person, literally pot them down and have a conversation while they're still in the show, and then be able to pull it back up and just stick them in, and being able to talk to them and being able to bring down their audio while someone else is talking to make sure that they don't interrupt them, and be, like as a live show, like once you get used to ISOs, you can't go back, because you're just like, it just feels like you're, going back into a cave. You can't
unless you have to. And so
unless you have to.
And for a lot of people that don't have the cash to throw out all the hardware. I'm not saying I love driving a Ferrari. I just can't afford one.
I'm just telling you, it's worth it. Just save up. All right, next question.
Philip Oler of Katona, New York is in with, I live in Microsoft Teams because there are clients, so not as familiar with Zoom. Can people in a Zoom meeting pin a person, and will the Zoom recording capture only the person who is pinned? Or would spotlighting accomplish this by automatically switching between speakers?
Spotlight won't automatically switch between speakers. That's speaker mode. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah. Kind of a couple of different things there, but so pinning is always just local. It only affects what you see on your machine. Where it does work is when you're doing a local recording from Zoom, using Zoom to do a local recording. That will record just a pinned view, and if you have it set to do separate audio clips, and it'll do a separate audio thing in there as well. The spotlighting won't do an automatic switch. And so then what you're talking about there is active speaker, which is kind of the default. If you have active speaker as full screen, that's just going to go to whoever is actively speaking, and which is possibly what you're wanting to do. And that will both live stream out and do the cloud recording if you use that, which I highly recommend with Zoom. It's a great backup feature. And so they're a couple of different things in Zoom.
Next, yeah, that's a great explanation. Next question.
Maranatha Spanish Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan says, good morning. My question is regarding noise in the feed. The house mix sounds great as well as the live stream thanks to office hours. But as I hear every day here from mic checks, I hear noise. How do I fix it? Note he searched the Pile sound box, came with mixed reviews. The target is 60 hertz. How do I know the hertz of the noise?
All right, go ahead, Jason.
The hertz of the noise is pretty easy. You just simply get some bars and an EQ graph that will output the frequency. My advice on this is very, very simple. Don't obsess about a little bit of room tone. Room tone is put back into productions in order to make people not lose their mind. It just has to be a good and a consistent thing, but do not obsess about just a little bit of room tone.
But I'm not sure whether he's talking about whether they're talking about buzz or noise or where it is. So let us know whether you think it's a hum. So a hum means something different to us than noise. So noise is there's white noise, which is just a shh. There's a hum, which is a hum, and then there's ambient noise. And so the question, if you can ask that question tomorrow or another time, is what kind of noise is it? Is it humming, or is it a white noise, or is it and then do we think that then the question is it on the source or it's on your end? Next question.
Moving on to Guy Cochran of Seattle, who says, how is the app Clubhouse different than anything we've seen before? And why is our friend Blue Melnick spending a lot of time there?
We should bring Blue on and have Blue talk about Clubhouse. I think it's cool. I'm excited about it. I just haven't got my head around it. Every time I go in, I feel like people are rambling. And so I just keep on moving along. Maybe that's the point. But I haven't, I think it was the same thing. It took me a little while with TikTok, took me a little while with other things to kind of get my head around it. And I haven't gotten my head fully around Clubhouse. I do have my account there. Maybe I'll get you guys to come in and do some. Leo?
So I've been using it quite a bit, but as I said, when we talked about it before, I feel like it's like CB radio from the 1970s. I don't know how long it's going to be around. I have a feeling it's got an attraction. The fact that it is all live is really interesting, but the long term of this, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure, because you can't produce anything of any quality. Right. The biggest complaint I have when I connect in is I'm connected on my Bose headphones, and it's just, I know I will sound worse than I sound here, and I won't even have a Mickey to shout at me.
And the hard part is that a lot of people dumb this down to keep everybody on the same playing field. But if you're doing audio, you should give people the opportunity to do great audio. That's the problem. Next question.
TJ Asher from Minneapolis. Movie night. Discuss.
I think it was a good start. I think we we had trouble with the app. I think was the biggest thing. And figuring out like the process of how we interact with each other, of like Bill looking at things and we know the questions should all go into Makana now. We know that trying to figure out how to make them real time is a little bit more challenging, and whether they need to be, that's the thing we'll keep on figuring out. I'm not sure if they do. Netflix parties things. So we're going to, we'll keep on. That's the only one out there, but Jason.
I'd say we learned a lot of things to never do again, and it was still fun. So who could ask for more on a first trial run? Yeah,
I want to thank Laura Seal we did a test, and then she wrote that huge description that everybody got yesterday, and she really made a big difference in getting us flattening that curve. It would have been a complete disaster without her writing that up on Sunday.
Amen.
So thank you to Laura.
Amen.
And don't share control. We learned that
don't
one
share
big
control. Yeah, we won't do that again. That was my fault. One more question, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and have the conversation with Shannon. When we get to the other end of that, we can try to come back to some of these questions if people want to hang out, and we can do it. We left a lot of questions, but I also don't want to have Shannon have to sit through another 15 or 20 minutes of us trying to get to the bottom of them. One more question. Go ahead.
Diogo Nunez of Barcelona, Spain says songwriting session over Zoom breakouts. 4 moderators need to receive videos from participants. Videos will be recorded live on each participant's cell phone. Need ideas to get the videos back to production for later editing.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Dropbox or mega.nz?
I think it's also the recording. I think I would probably have a Zoom participant join each one of them that's capable of recording. Like each one of the breakout rooms, you'll need somebody to join it that has a computer that can basically pull that record. Go ahead, Brian, real quick, and then Mickey.
There's an app that OWC released in December called Copy That, which is free with add-ons. You can copy videos off of an iOS device to external storage, network storage, and some cloud storage services. And that for some people, getting the video off the phone is the first really difficult step.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to go ahead and shift gears here. It's 8:00, and what we'll do is we're going to come back to this. We're still trying to figure out how to manage our tendency to talk too long, and we talked a little too long today. So, another reminder also is when you're doing second hour questions is to make sure to tag them. So once you ask the question, you don't have to type it into second hour. To ask the question in Makana, and as soon as it's posted, then you can tag it like you would add a note. You can tag it a second hour, and that makes it easier for us to find. I am super excited to have Shannon Cooper back. Shannon and I have been in the trenches together for almost a decade, and working on projects all over the world, and a lot of high stress ones where I think we call each other like, why are we doing this? Just crazy. I think I told you I think at some point I told the story of the leopard in the hangout. Well, Shannon was the one that had the leopard in the hangout. And so Shannon has worked on before, we'll talk about it a little bit, but worked on literally thousands of events with thousands of participants with us. And we were talking about, basic stuff last week, and there was a request to bring Shannon back in to talk again about participant prep and the process, and where it comes from, and how we approach it. Anyway, go ahead and start stacking your questions up a little bit. Shannon, can you tell people, like, how did you get into virtual events? I mean, in the first place.
Well, I answered the phone one day.
It was like
well, Alex and I had worked together before in the past, and my past life, I was a video editor, and then I moved into live stage events, and that's how I met Alex. And then one day he said, "Hey, we're doing this hangout thing. Would you come and help?" And I said, "Sure." And I will say, I think
it was supposed to be a 3-hour tour.
That's right. And ever since then, I will say, I think my life has been a blur. Definitely 8 years of that time was a blur. It was just one event after the other, one participant after the other. So that's how it started.
And how has your thought process around participant prep evolved from 2012 till now?
Well, I think even early on, we were sending out kits. So I think we realized really quickly that we had to prep folks. We couldn't just have them join. We have done many events where we've had to just have people jump in. And even those events, we like to run them through this green room idea, even if we only have a minute or two with them. So I don't know if it's changed so much, because I think we really started that process early on. I think we've refined our kits throughout the years. We've refined the way we ask the process of prepping folks. We start with a form. We find out as much as we can about people and their tech setup. But I do think that we've been fairly consistent throughout the years of the importance of that.
And I think it might have been that we started with high profile individuals. So the very first ones we did were all like movie stars and political leaders and so on and so forth. And so you knew that you had to provide that white glove service, and then maybe kind of leak down.
Yeah, I think so. And we really treat, I think, every single participant with every single event, no matter who they are, the same. They're all important. That event is really important to them. And we just approach it as we want to help them look and sound as best as they possibly can. It's quite amazing, just what a few little things can do and to improve the quality. And many people just don't know. Like they don't know that they're not coming through clearly, and that their video is stalling, and that their lighting is too dark, and when you start to point those things out, I think almost everyone is appreciative. There have been very few people that don't appreciate that prep process. In fact, there are a lot of events that we work on, especially now, that people are saying, "Oh my gosh, I did an event last week and I went back and I looked at it and it was horrible, and I don't know how people heard what heard me, and so they appreciate the time that we take to do that."
And what's the basic overview of how you approach from the beginning to the end, how you approach the participants?
Well, the first thing we do is find out. We send them a form to find out what their tech setup is. Even if we're going to send them a kit, we want to know what kind of computer they have. Do they already have a webcam? Something more advanced. So we email that out, and then I am a big fan of individual prepping. A lot of people bring everyone in all at once and test everyone. I like that individual attention, so we can it takes more time. But I like to have that one-on-one. And so we schedule a time, and then we run our tech checks. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, and other times we have literally spent hours.
Days, it feels like. I think
sometimes days.
Yeah,
because we'll need to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we'll need to send them something else, or they'll be moving locations, or they want to add some more lighting, and then they'll ask for an additional check. And I always will say I'm happy to go back, and you're gonna you're going to switch rooms, you're going to add a couple lights, just email me and let me know, and I'll jump back on. So we just really, I think, approach everyone individually and with thoughtfulness, and spend as much time as we need to. And you hope not everyone at every event needs hours or days. You're really happy when it's really quick. I think the other thing that the tech checks do is you talk through the show flow with them. You kind of get them more at ease. And especially with folks that maybe don't do this every day. And so they appreciate that time that we spend.
Which is sometimes easier than people who do it every day.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Yeah, we definitely deal with those people like, I'm fine. I'm like, no, you're not. You have a Dell laptop with a built-in webcam and you don't have a microphone. No, you're not fine. And so we have to kind of sometimes coax a few people.
So once what happens after you get the kind of that initial check with them?
Well, once they're checked off, then the next thing we do is we talk to them in the green room. So, and we schedule our green room typically, I mean, it really depends on the event, the level of event, and how many people are there, but anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes. And sometimes I'll even open up the green room earlier if we know that people just want to do a double check, or there's a lot of people and they want to have a conversation first. And so I'll open up the green room even earlier. And then that's it. We save the green room as it's not a time to fix things. I mean, we allow that time that if something has changed from the time that we tested them to the time that we are live, there are often sometimes tweaks. There are definitely stories about all of a sudden someone had great internet and then they didn't 10 minutes before the event. And so we like to go into the green room with as flat as possible so that we can use that time to for any emergencies and then just to relax and have a conversation. But then that's it.
And that gets back to one of the things in the initial prep. We also want to make sure that they are actually testing from where they're going to come in from.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's been a common problem. It's a common problem of, hey, we tested you somewhere. Like that's the first, probably the first thing that you usually ask, right? Is this going to be the place that you're going to come in from?
That is. Well, we send out a note. We send it. It's in the form. It's in the email. We expect you to be in the location, the same state, the same house, preferably the same room with the same setup that you're going to be using. And there are, that's sometimes they haven't chosen the best choice. So we'll walk around with their computer looking for a better place. But it is surprising that even though we'll say, please be in the same house, folks sometimes just don't. So,
right.
And then we have to do it again.
And how do you work with people who don't want to add anything?
Who don't want to add anything? Well, we let them know that in most cases, there are other folks in the event with them. And we let them know that we've sent out, kits and cameras and microphones to everyone else. And we're just trying, we want to make you look as good as you possibly can. And so we kind of use that, which really helps because there are, again, people that say, oh, I'm fine. And then, you try, they're not. I mean, that and sure, it's fine. And I let people know, hey, that's fine for a conversation with your friends, even a business meeting. Although I will say, I let people know, even no matter what, every meeting, every Zoom, you should always have a microphone because it's not just for events. But anyway, you just, I just let them know that we're just trying to have them look their best. And sometimes people just won't. You can't fight that. And you have to know when to stop, I think is the key too. You don't want to push. But on the other hand, your client is paying you to prep folks. Your client has paid to send them this kit. And so that can be a little bit of a balance sometimes.
I do think that it's interesting that I think we're probably more pushy than most, because it's, a lot of times it is, we've learned over time that being, nice before the show, and then they get into the show and then they're really upset that they didn't look very good or they didn't sound good or somebody's upset about it. And so
right.
I think we know that better than most clients, or our clients, and it's easier for us to do it than the client. Like if you're an internal person working at a company asking your CEO to do something or your whatever is very hard. Having the third party do it, is oftentimes easier to have that conversation than otherwise.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Okay, we've got a couple.
And if you're in the panel, please ask the questions and tag them in Mukana. We're trying to keep all the questions in Mukana. So go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so the two top-rated questions come from Laura Seal in Greensboro. The first one is, Shannon, do you have a checklist you work from? And if so, are you willing to share it?
Yeah, in fact, I think, and it's been a while, I think I may have posted it in the Discord, and I can post the checklist and the, so I have two checklists. I have the checklist that I send to everyone, and then I actually have two additional checklists. I have the checklist that my checklist that I'm asking folks. I go down, in order of let's look at your internet. Let's make sure, your Wi-Fi is turned off. I go through all of that. And then I have a day of show checklist as well, which is similar to that, but just I go in manually and make some changes. But I start with a base, and then before every event starts, I'll just go through and customize my documents. But I'm happy to post those somewhere on the Discord.
That'd be great. Next question.
And Laura's second one that got really highly rated. Shannon, how often do you deal with someone who obstinately insists their way is better than yours, and how do you make your case?
I would say it depends. I mean, 20, maybe 10%. Some shows, none. Some shows, everyone. You just like, oh my gosh, you're model participants. And then, so it's a small number. And again, I think what Alex and I were talking about is we make the case by saying we'd like, everyone else on the panel is going to have a microphone and a webcam, and we're working with them, to light them, et cetera. So we want you to look as good as everyone. We want to make you look and good as, and sound as good as you possibly can. So, and again, at one point you have to feel out the person. And sometimes you just politely, quietly, just give up. And then I always inform our clients. So I'll send them back notes saying, and in my form, I typically share those back-end forms with the client. And I take notes like this person is choosing to use their own mic, and here's their mic. And so it's just communicating with the client and not pushing the participant, because what's even worse than a bad setup is a frustrated person.
Yeah. Next question.
Rachel Ann Clifton is in with our next question, and she asks, do you believe recognizing personality traits of the client is vital to your role? And how much academic study do you do focused on psychologies? Thanks.
Let's see if I understand that question. I mean, yeah, different. You mean, I'm not sure if
just their approach, maybe their approach to it.
Well, I think we try to guide the approach. So, and I think most of our clients understand that we're guiding that approach. We, from pretty much all of our shows that we do now, we require that the participants get a kit. So we kind of set that approach.
And for us, I think a lot of it for us, we kind of made the decision that if you don't want a kit, you're not taking this seriously. And if you're not taking this seriously, there's a string of problems that are going to happen with the event of them being under-resourced.
And I think I would say that, our clients are working with us on these events because they know our approach and that's something that they want for their event. And I typically invite our clients to our preps. They don't. Sometimes folks come and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they use it as an opportunity for additional meetings with the participant if they haven't had enough time to talk with them. But I always make that invitation that they can come and listen and watch and especially for VIP clients, sometimes or their VIP participants, the client wants to join as well. But I would say they're usually pretty happy that this is what we're doing.
And in some clients, we don't see the client until the very last minute. I mean, because we're working with their assistant, if it's a high enough profile person, don't see them. You really, and then you can be really pushy with the assistants, like because their job is to make everybody look, they make their boss look good. So you can sit there and they'll work with you, they'll figure stuff out, they'll take it to the nth degree. Usually. Next question.
The next highest rated is Matt Cooley of Montreal, who says, "Can you talk about some gotchas like Apple headphones on a Dell laptop not working?"
Oh yeah, there's lots of gotchas. So that's why we do the test. And I mean, there's just this list of things that we know we're going to have problems with, and we steer people away from those issues. For instance, like wireless headphones on Dell laptops are my favorite. So you just know what those gotchas are going to be.
I think the Dell has gotten a little better, but for many years they looked like warm soup, and like it was just like this weird.
Yeah, and I will say yes. I don't. Yeah, sorry, and I don't mean to like say I'm talking definitely older laptops that people will open up these laptops that are really ancient and they're just not great, and that's why we encourage adding webcams and things like that. But there are
some of the ones that I think of off the top of my head are like Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, getting rid of the Wi-Fi, getting the Ethernet in there. Light Windows is something I worry about a lot.
Windows are really hard. Yeah.
Hard rooms, like rooms that have a lot of hard surfaces.
We try to do the tests at similar times when we're going to be doing the event. Obviously, that's not always possible with participant prep, but we talk about what the lighting's going to look like at that particular time, because that is a huge gotcha. The prep might be perfect, and then during the event, you get this big streak just slowly going across. That's a stressful one.
Next question.
Laura Seal is back from Greensboro. Shannon, what's the hardest technical improvements to coach someone on remotely? Framing, lighting, microphone technique, or something else?
I think microphone placement and I think that's challenging. And sometimes what I do for that is, especially if we've given them, we send everyone these headset mics, and people are trying to adjust them and figure them out. And I just tell them to, I show them what it should look like. And then I say, go away. You can do that on your own. You don't have to spend time doing that with me. And then we can check it again in the green room. I think lighting is really hard remotely, because if you don't know what their space looks like, so you need to talk about, like, do you have a skylight? That's a big gotcha, because many people want to sit underneath a skylight, and you've prepped them on a cloudy, foggy day, and then all of a sudden it's lit. So you can't, if you can't see their space, it's challenging. So I like to, sometimes I'll say, just move your camera around. Let's look at your space. And so we don't end up with those gotchas.
Yep. Next question.
James Babbitt of San Diego in with, if a presenter uses a good mic and would rather not wear a listening device, what steps could you take to have the best audio?
You mean a listening? I think they're saying an earbud.
Mm-hmm.
Turn down your audio on your computer as low as possible. So obviously, so you don't get any feedback, you want to be able to hear, but lower the volume. That's probably the biggest improvement that you can. That's what I tell them. Alex, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
I try to explain that you really can't have a great conversation. I know we do it, but you can't get full duplex audio, or you can't get two-way communication without a headset, without everybody having an earpiece in. So, it's just, I try to explain to them that it's just better. It's going to be way better conversation. And they're like, well, it works all the time. I'm like, does it? Like there's a lot of things that work when we're having a barbecue in the back door, but it wouldn't work on a stage in front of 300 people. And I think that I use the barbecue talk a lot, which is just that, there's a lot of things that work okay when in a small number of people, when it doesn't matter, that don't work when it does matter, and a lot of people are trying to listen to you. And, a lot of the things that I know I talk about with clients is do you want them to be thinking about what you're talking about, or trying to figure out what you're saying? Like, that's up to you. like if I'm going to be at an event, I want people to think about what I'm talking about. I don't want them to be trying to figure out what I just said, because that takes away the interactivity, that takes away the engagement, that takes away a lot of other things. And so, so anyway, and when we talk to clients, not so much the participant prep, but we talk a lot about the common thing that I say here, which is you can choose to, content can be easy to make or easy to watch. It's rarely both. So if you're not going to put the work into it, you're going to push all that work over to your viewers, and that's usually not a great solution. You're paying us to not have that happen. Next question.
Shannon, you're killing me today. Everybody has questions for you. This is nuts. Tony Mobley's up next with what's Shannon's setup today and with customers.
My setup today, I have a Logitech C920, and I have the Pulson mic with a Tech Rise, and I've got a ring light. I have many different lights, and I've got different places depending on what's going on in the world around me at the house. I'll move around. So I've got a couple different light setups, but my mic and camera come with me. And then I've got my backdrop.
Which is the Lazulite, right?
Which is the Lazulite. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I have a some of my spaces are really small. And so I have the smaller Lazulite. And so it's to be very careful. Alex is like, get the big one. And I live in San Francisco and my office is so small. I'm like, that is the size of my office. It won't work. So, but I love the Lazulite. In fact, so many folks that we prep, they really like, they'll ask like, oh, what's that background? And we've recommended this to a lot of people.
It's funny, what's funny, the clients actually notice it because we're starting to get to a point where everybody in the company has a gray background, and they're just like, who are these people? Like you'd be surprised. People notice those things where suddenly there's consistency of some kind.
Well, backgrounds, I think that's kind of that's another topic, but backgrounds are really important. And sometimes I think for some conversations, it really works to have them in their space, to have people to see what their space is like, to see their books, to see their whatever, their artwork. And then for other conversations, it's a distraction. So, so I find that a lot of folks that do just a lot of talks, a lot of interviews, having a background like this just makes it easy and it's less distracting.
Yeah. Next question.
Lou Perez in Phoenix says, how do you explain to people that their clothing or background will not work on camera?
Oh, I just tell them. I mean, and again, most people are happy to hear that because some people, they just don't know. So anyway,
straightforward. Next question.
Laura Seal of Greensboro says, Shannon, does your job require superhuman patience? What traits and skill sets are the most important for someone in your role?
Patience, and then a really good team to reach out to. So there are, especially with folks that we're prepping that maybe we didn't send them a kit, they're using something different, more advanced. Some, we're talking to musicians and they've got, they've got different ways that they're getting their music in. I feel like I have a pretty good base of reaching out to folks. Many of them are on this panel, and I think and sometimes I'll even bring them in. Like I'll say, hey, I'm gonna bring in an audio expert here, and they're gonna help us with this. So definitely it's a lot of patience and then knowing that you can reach out to a really great team to help you when you just don't know.
Next question.
Sky in Seattle says, thank you, Shannon, for the hard work. Can you share your form and what checklists you use in your system to talk to people? What examples do you show your participants to help them see what the expectation is?
I don't know if I show them examples. One thing I will say is once people connect with a better camera and they can't hear the mic, but if they connect with a better camera, they can see it. They can see what the lighting does. So, and then we also have, we'll send them sometimes, if it's appropriate, examples of something that we have done and, say this is what you could look like. We probably don't have enough like on paper examples, but we talk through it with people.
Next question.
Grant has a couple in here that people have rated very highly. First is, what is the Tech Check appointment booking system that you use?
So, typically I'll send out a form, and just a Google form, and then I'll ask them to send me several times and days that work, because I'd like to be accommodating, but also I have to keep, there's schedules that have to be kept. So I always ask them, and that seems to work really well. And then I send a calendar invite with every Tech Check. And that's where I also include the client on the calendar invite, so they know that something's been scheduled. I'm not expecting them to join. There was something that we used recently for an event, and I actually can't recall what it was that we've used. We've used it a couple times. I'll remember in a minute, probably as soon as I'm done. But I can post that as well. But just a simple form, we just send a link to a form.
Yeah, there's been a couple group ones. I mean, there's, we haven't, I think because we do a lot of white glove, you just they don't want to work in any kind of system that you have to kind of do it in traditional corporate, like what's available for you and how does it work? And we're not dealing usually with average attendees. We're usually dealing with, VIPs. I think that's the challenge there. Next question.
Grant, second one is, what's the greatest number of presenters you've had to check in for a single event?
Oh my gosh. At the same time?
Well, for the same event, maybe.
For the same event? Well, we've done events that are 6, 7, 8 hours long, and it's just a constant flow. So dozens of people, like literally dozens. We've done events where it's panels. We did an event recently this summer where it was 2 days, I think 6 hours a day, with panels every hour. And each panel had up to 6 or 7 people.
Yeah, I think that we had about 35 or 40 presenters for that.
Yeah,
event.
that was really challenging.
And they were different. They were in different platforms. So we had one. They'd have be talking to each other, and one could only, because they were government. It was, some people couldn't use Zoom, and some people only use Teams, and some people use Skype, and so literally in WebEx. And so we had to literally, every computer, and this is one of the advantages of the ISO computers, is that every computer would get switched over, so that we would, because we don't really care. I mean, we care a little bit, but because each computer is its own island, it can be WebEx or Zoom or Skype, and it's still getting the two-way interface and two-way video. It just looks better or worse, based on which one. Like WebEx has just tons of junk all over it. You can't get rid of it. And Teams is not too bad, actually. And then Skype is Skype. You hit Command minus a whole bunch of times and you get rid of most of the interface, or you used to be able to. So it was like this wrestling match. That was a very
I mean, but yeah, that was
probably the worst rehearsal ever.
Yeah, probably one of the most challenging events ever. We've had lots of challenging ones, but from a participant perspective, that one was really, really hard, and it was really long, and it went on for days. And a lot of folks were coming in from other countries, and so there was a language.
I think Shannon was doing participant prep almost 24/7.
I was
like old cat naps, to get everybody working.
Yeah, I have a couch in my office, so I'm just sleeping in it. Yeah.
Next question.
Lou Perez in Phoenix says, Shannon, what are you using as both a picture monitor and an audio monitor to evaluate people's setups?
So when I do, probably could do more with that. Right now it's my laptop, and my headset, and then before, when we do our rehearsals, then I'm in communication with our broadcast control. So they're looking at everything through scopes and monitors. And so we just do a double check on the, on our rehearsals. And again, sometimes as well, if I need, if I really need to fine tune something, I'll ping someone that's in the control room and say, hey, can we loop you in here so you can take a look at this?
And a lot of it's the serious end of things, because we have proc amps for every person because of the way the ISO system works, and so we can tune people, so we get them as close as we can get them, and then we can, if we need to add contrast or move the color a little bit here and there, that can be done on our end as well, because it's all ISO'd out. It's going through our system before it goes into Zoom, and so we're able to make fine adjustments to their video before it goes in. Next question
comes from Mickey here in the panel. In the Philippines, how do you deal with gotchas like company-supplied computers that are locked down in terms of software and hardware that can be installed, but the contributor has no idea that it is locked down?
Yeah, that is hard, and sometimes we can't use them. I mean, they'll find another. There have been times definitely where they've had to find other solutions. And most people are pretty resourceful, and we've even had to switch to iPads at some point. You can't, they just are having issues. I think
and that got into that government one that we talked about, where we had to use Teams or WebEx or whatever, because that's what's built into their system. They can interact with the outside world, but they can't install something new. And that was, go ahead, Mickey.
Sorry, but what about the kits, the headset mics, the microphone, the cameras that can't be installed?
Well, if they can't be installed, which is, that definitely happens, and there are times where we just can't use it, or we've had them bring in another computer, or they've switched locations. Depends on the level of event. Again, when we were doing this event with government, literally all over the place, all over the world. And there were folks that just said, I'm going to do this from home. The firewall's too much at the office. This computer is too old. And I'm really straightforward with people. Many folks just want to come in through their video conferencing, and I really try to avoid that. People think that they say, well, we do this all the time, and they're using a tabletop mic in a big, huge room. And
we had that one recently that they suddenly, I think it was a jaw-dropping experience for them to realize how bad the audio and video was in a room that they spent a lot of money on.
Yeah. And in fact, if it's the same one that we're talking about, they ended up we made some mic recommendations, and they went out and got another mic. Luckily we had time, which is an advantage to checking in with people a couple weeks before. If you have that time, you don't want to check in with them too far in advance, because things can change, but you want to check in, you want to do your tech check more than 2 or 3 days in advance. So if you have to send them something, if they have to make changes, they can do that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and then sometimes we just have to go with it. You just make the best with what you can. It's life. The event has to go on, and so you just do what you can do to use that computer and their existing audio and move on.
And I know that and it depends on the budget. We've had situations where we rented a Regent room, which is kind of the precursor to WeWork, where we rented, I remember we had a UN ambassador, I think, that we had to get her out of the UN because there was no way we could connect to it, and there was a Regent across the street, but we paid, I don't know, it was like $3,000 for that room, to have it with the bandwidth that we needed and everything else. It was expensive, and the client was fine. It's a big project, but those are the kind of things. It just depends on how much money you can throw at problems. Next question
comes from Sound Mixer San Francisco. Jesse Mills here in the panel. What are the steps you take when a remote panelist's internet connection is going down?
Oh, well, there are many. If it actually goes down, and if we know that they might have those issues, we'll set up a dial-in, and we'll get a photo. And we've had to do this not many times, but where we've just brought in a photo, and then they're on the phone. I'm just trying to think of a time where I don't know if we ever had an event. Alex, maybe you remember, but I don't know if we ever had an event where the internet went. Well, there's one, but there not many events where someone's coming in and their internet just goes down. We do things like often the thing that's happening the most when something like that happens is there's other people in the house using the internet. Mm-hmm. And so if we see that it's going down or that we're having issues, we'll make sure, your kids aren't, gaming, that, all of the, your other people aren't doing conferences, web calls. And we ask those questions in advance. So we really try to put those safety nets in advance of the show. And sometimes, things are just going to happen. So we always have a phone that we can text someone on, so that we can make a phone call. And that definitely happens where people have dropped, and then we'll call them and work through in the green room. I never close the green room during an event. Always keep that open. So there's always a place for someone to come back to and work on issues. And then we'll, hopefully get that sorted out and then bring them back into the show. And then the nice thing is then we can typically tell the host,
and again,
so-and-so has dropped.
Where the ISOs become really useful is that we had one where we had a participant that their internet was falling apart, and we were able to tell the host, hey, don't call on Lauren for a minute. like Lauren's coming apart. I need you just keep on having the conversation. But we're able to do that and talk back because we have ISOs, and they just kind of nod a little bit while someone else is talking. And then we took that person out. We had them restart Skype. We had them come back in. We rechecked them, but all of that's happening live, while we're doing it. And it's also why it's hard for one person to manage an event on our end, because we have someone, we're sitting there working with them, making sure that it's working. I think they checked in with Shannon and kind of worked some stuff out, and then they checked in, then they came back into that, and then they're back in the show. So, and again, for higher end events, that's why the ISO situation becomes so important, is being able to error. It's not, it's, we don't build pipelines for sunny days. We build them for rainy days. So that's the key to the operation.
And if we're lucky and if we're managing that tightly enough, the viewer won't even know that this is happening.
Yeah. And the main thing though is also that a whole lot of warnings go out if we see to our client, if we see any bandwidth below 5 megs. Like if anybody testing under 5 megs, there's like a whole lot of emails that go out and say, we don't think this is going to work. It's some clients won't listen the first time, but they usually listen the next time because they watch someone unwrap, in an event, and so that's just it's kind of what we try to kind of keep pushing for. And we just tell them what the risks are. Like it may connect, but it may not, and make sure that because it protects us with the brand or with the client, to tell them ahead of time that things aren't going to work, rather than just shrug when they don't work. If they got like 2 or 3 emails from us that say we're concerned this isn't going to work because of bandwidth, and then it doesn't work, the client usually will take that on themselves that they weren't listening, in a way that, and we do it nicely, but we definitely outline a lot of things that, I think the reason we have so little failures is because we have such a high mark that we're trying to hit all the time, and we are very vocal when we don't get it. What were you going to say, Shannon?
I was going to say a couple of there have been a few times where we have suggested, that the internet's too low, and they've replaced the participant if they can, because it just wasn't going to work, and now it's harder, and it's especially several months ago it was much harder to move people around. We used to just say, oh, can you go into your office, or can you go to a friend's house, or whatever, another location? And that was easy to move people around. And now they just don't. So we've actually had to replace speakers, participants before, because of just no bandwidth.
And when we do VIP events, we also oftentimes will do what we call a per sane build, which is that they put out a call to action, hundreds of people sign up, and they all fill out the form. And then we just pick the ones that have good bandwidth. So we're not, we just kind of skip, if you have bad bandwidth and you want to talk to a basketball star, that's not going to happen, because you got to think about what it takes to put them on stage. That's the thing. Next question.
Maggie Barton Baird of Edmonton, Canada says, any tips on streamlining this process of speaker prep?
I think what streamlines it the most is good communication before you even talk to them. So making sure that people understand what you're expecting from them, and so that we don't show up just with a kind of starting from scratch. They've thought about some of these things. They've thought about, can you connect with a hard line? They've thought about are they sitting in front of a window or not? And what can take a long time in the day of prepping is if someone just comes in really cold and they haven't thought about it. And I think over the last 9 months or so, more people have been thinking about this a lot more than they used to. So I think some of these things are just are a little more streamlined than they had been. But I hope that answered the question. It's just prep in advance.
Next question.
Stuart Fairweather here on the panel from Melbourne. Can Shannon share any gear in her own setup that isn't following the Alex recipe?
Well, I think we talked about it a little bit. Yours isn't probably quite as built up as mine, the one that you're using there, and because that's kind of our base unit, right?
It's the base unit, and I part of it is just somewhat space constraints for me, and then other things. The other thing is that since this is our base kit that we send out, I like to have what we are sending out. So if we adjust anything, so if we send out if we're sending out a different mic or a different light, I like to have that so that I can literally walk through and I can say, I have this mic, see this mic, and see this. I'm not going to move my camera here, but if I was prepping, I would take my camera off and I would show them what the tech rise looks like. So I try to mimic what we're sending out, at least for the basic kits.
And the key is, and I'm mimicking the larger kit that we use, which is the 6K with the lights and everything else. And a lot of that is by using it every day, we also are very comfortable with it so that, we know what the gotchas are by just reps, it's so much of this is just reps. And so having everybody use the kits that we're sending out makes it, and adjusting them makes it a lot easier for us to troubleshoot. If that's the only time you see it, and you also see like, oh, these are gotchas. This isn't really working. Let's make some adjustments, those kinds of things. Next question.
Courtney Gooden from the panel in Hollywood. Have you ever had to deal with a high-profile client that receives a full kit from you that gets damaged in shipment, or maybe has been messed with by curious children and so forth? Do you pre-check far enough advance to allow for shipment replacements?
We try. Yeah, that's why we always like to check at least, at the very least, 3 to 4 days in advance, if not, a week or two, because for that reason, we want to make sure it works and that it's not damaged and that it's the right thing. So now, like, we have to send adapters with everything because we're sending things that have to be plugged in, and many folks, especially with the Mac, don't have a USB anymore, so we have to send adapters. And sometimes those things will get, I don't know, they'll lose them or whatever. We need to send an additional one, or they didn't tell us the correct model of their computer and we needed to send something else. So yeah, at least 4 days, so we have time to do a drop ship from Amazon is always a kind of a little lifesaver with those things.
And we actually, benefit a lot from this group where there's people all over the world that we've called in this group going, hey, can you support something? And then people from our production background where we just ask someone to support something locally. Like the kits that we had recently for an event or for records, we actually had a person drop off the kit and then pick it up. And the reason we did that was it was heavy and needed to get there. It was 3 Pelican cases and a tripod, but B, it was also that we needed data off of it. We didn't want it to just go back into the wild. And these are VIPs, they're CEOs and so on and so forth. We need to they don't have to think. It was bad enough that they had to build their own kit. We didn't want to make them actually try to figure out when FedEx was going to show up.
It is nice to have that access of a big community. We have a really large community, just years of doing this and years of doing assisted, remote events where we had someone locally from a city. And there have been times where we needed something really quickly. Like they didn't need, we tend to send out long Ethernet cables if someone needs an Ethernet cable, but sometimes they've mismeasured or they've moved locations and now it's not, a 50-foot run. It's 100 feet because they have to go in and around steps or whatever. So sometimes we'll send someone to Best Buy. Like, can you, someone in our group or one of our remote producers, and they'll go pick up bits and pieces.
Yeah, we had one Pixcore member fly from Melbourne to Manila, grab a drive, and then fly to New York. And when he was in New York, I think for maybe 3 hours in the airport, handed it to the editors, and then jumped back on a plane to Melbourne. Like it was and we was like, hey, and we called him at the last minute, like, hey, I need to pay you to do this crazy thing. Are you willing to just sit on a plane and to get it to where it needs to go? And he was open to it. It was a crazy thing. Nowadays we would just have Mickey fly to. We'd say, Mickey, pay you a lot of money to. We'd probably get Mickey to give us somebody to fly there. Mickey wouldn't do it. Anyway, next question.
Stephen Kimbrough here in the panel from Berkeley. Shannon, what have you learned in getting people, mainly men, over the I won't wear a head-worn mic because it'll make me look like Madonna issue?
Well, one thing I'll do is I will, if they just want to use a headset or they don't want to use any mic at all, I'll show them what it sounds like. I'll turn off my mic and use my headset mic. I'll use my computer mic. And I'll say, do you hear a difference? And that actually gets a lot of people. Same thing with lights. I'll turn off my light. I'll turn it on. I'll say, it's a little bit better with this light, right? Oh yeah. I'll turn off my webcam. It's a little bit better with this webcam, right? Oh yeah. So with the microphone, I feel like less and less people are getting hung up on the Madonna mic thing. And I'll say, like this mic, like the kind that if you were on a stage event, you typically see a speaker wear this. And so I think comparing it to that world gets people over that as well. And they'll be like, oh yeah, you're right. I think
that it's become easier. There's a much more acceptance for mics being in frame than there was pre-COVID, where people are just kind of used to seeing some person in their meeting with a mic in the frame. So I think that there's less stigma to having mics in frame than there was before. Next question.
Maranatha Spanish Church in Grand Rapids back with, I've been asked about finding an event organizer, but the ones I find in
I think it's decline or incline.
The ones I find
online.
Maybe online. Want personal and credit card before I get to know pricing. Is this normal? Gosh.
That is not normal.
They want your credit card information before?
No, it's not normal. That's a very odd thing.
Can you spell scam?
Yeah. Or just someone who's not thinking the business out very well about that. That seems like a very abnormal approach to the process. Yeah. Next question.
Ken Jones in Seattle is in with, dealing with the I'm fine people must be a challenge. Do you have any war stories to share?
Let me think. I don't know if there are any war stories, but I always feel, excuse me, with the I'm fine people, again, you warn the client that this person says they're fine. They don't want to. They don't want to. Kind of up their.
Well, you have that one where you coax the woman. Remember the woman that was in a recent one? Tell that one. That was a good one.
Yeah. No, we had a very high energy woman. She was in a lot of speaking engagements. Was online all day long, and she was like, "I'm not going to do it. I don't need this. I've got my stuff." And I just said, well, let me try it. Can we just try it? And I got her to try the microphone, try the camera, try like every little thing. I just kind of coaxed it that let's just give it a try. And I think she during the rehearsals, she saw what a difference it made. And after the event, or before the live event, but after the rehearsals, she came fully prepared, and she was like, "This is amazing! I can't believe I haven't been doing this the whole time." But I literally had to just coax one at a time, and sometimes it's like that, and then like when to push when you pushed it so far. But the first thing if they're going to be resistant to everything, the first thing I try is the microphone. If I can get them to do anything, it's let's do the mic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Next question.
Next question. I'm not having a little trouble parsing here. Is the earpiece comms a Zoom room or is it a call? Do you use an earpiece for those?
Yeah. So we don't have to the way we do the Zoom rooms or the way we do ISOs, people don't have to have anything new. They have the earpiece, but they get the Zoom call. They don't have to have a second call to get comms. And that's the big thing for us, is that we don't have to get them to call in somewhere. We used to. So we used to, before we had talkback to every person through Hangouts, for instance, we had to call them and have the host get on a phone call or go to meeting or something, so we could talk to them if we needed to. And that was a huge issue. Like, how do we mix it so that they only have one earpiece, and how do we do this? And it was really painful. And by controlling the ISOs, you end up with a much better situation. Next question.
Yeah, Stuart Fairweather here on the panel wants to bring you in, Shannon, to join Ruthless Reviews on the panel one day so that you can take us all to task.
I think he's done it before. We've got.
I think I was in the first Ruthless review. So
yeah. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm up for it.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, as the judge. The judge.
Yeah. We'll have Shannon be the final say.
Yes, giving us the ultimate thumbs up or thumbs down.
Next question.
Hasmukh is in from Cape Town, and this, I think, is our last second
we got
hour
another
question.
one coming in.
You got another one coming late. Okay. Outside of the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera for high-end events, which is the most preferred webcam you send out in your kits, and which is the one you send out reluctantly outside of setting up audio? How much time is spent on the video?
So the C920, the Logitech C920, and that's our base. That's our base one, and then we'll send out the Brio is the next. We've tried a couple other cameras and just find that the Logitech, just the color just seems really consistent. It just works with most computers. And Alex, you may be able to speak more to the tech end, but from the just kind of the consistency of color and clarity, the Logitech, and sometimes they're hard to find, and we've had to rely on amazing resources, and when we see them available, we'll sometimes buy some up and have a little bit of a stock. It can be a little bit stressful if you're looking for 20 to send out. And
fortunately, we have a connection in South Africa.
Fortunately. Yeah, which those connections they've definitely saved the events, but that's it. And I say we spend more time we spend the most time either on lighting or audio. Video is a little bit simpler. We had a person recently where her computer, I don't recall what it was. I have it somewhere in my notes, but and I like to keep notes that I can reference back so that if you start to see repeat patterns of things, and you can go back and refer to your documents like, oh, wait, wasn't there this person that had this issue where they couldn't connect and their camera, we couldn't see their camera. What kind of computer did they have? And, what was their setup? But typically the cameras are the easiest, but this one person, her camera just was not, it would just like her color would go out, and we had to spend a lot of time working with her, and that was a very unique situation. But in most cases, the video is the easiest.
It's funny if someone has a built-in. We talked about this the other day, I think. But if someone has a built-in camera, if they're using their MacBook camera or whatever, or any other camera, the number one thing to do is ask them to wipe it. Can you get a little cloth, a little Kleenex, and just wipe your video camera? Every person, like it fixes something. Like if they don't have an external camera, the internal camera, it fixes it every single time with a little piece of cloth. It massively improves it for the internal camera in your computer. Less about the external cameras, but it seems to just collect all kinds of schmutz. Anyway,
now,
next. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. One other thing is I also recommend that if you have a Mac, to download a external camera app to make adjustments. So and they're pretty cheap on the App Store, and most people are very happy to do that. I haven't found a good solution for PCs for that. Right. So I would love to have a good solution. I've been using manual camera and switching over to Alex. What do you use now?
I go back to webcam settings.
Okay. But dramatic difference. And again, I show them. I'll say, here's how you can get a little bit more light. And I have this app, and then it's like, oh, and people find those little tips really helpful.
And the only caveat is if they have a newer Mac, 2018 or newer, and as soon as you turn that app on, you will not have access to the webcam until you restart your computer. It's a security thing, so it immediately turns off. So if you're going to turn on an external controller, you need to know that you have an external webcam that you can use. Otherwise, they'll need to restart. It just shuts off. Go ahead, Sky.
Can you put those two names of those two apps in Makana, please?
Someone can. Yeah, if someone can throw that in. Manual camera and webcam settings are the two.
Oh, those are the names. Oh, got it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Next question.
Brody Hafner of New York City has our second to last. If client uses Bluetooth-enabled hearing aids, do you typically link directly to them?
Oh, I haven't actually run into that.
Yeah, I haven't either. Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, that's what Graham uses, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's a $3,000 phonics kit, or what are those? The big name, Phonak, and that's what, if you want to go to T at 3 looking for good on YouTube, you'll hear what it sounds like. Now the internet is a different problem.
Next question. Last question.
And the final one. Mickey is going to put us on a positive note for the end here to switch things around. Any examples of great, easy, or fun experiences with tech checks and setups that you have, Shannon?
Yeah, I love tech checks. I will have to say, I have met some amazing people, and sometimes they're just fun. Working with musicians has been really fun. We did one where they wrote a song for the show, a song just for the event that we were doing, and it felt really special to be in their studio with them and helping just make the interview look and sound as good as possible. And I've just met, I would say, 95% of the people that we test are really good experiences and just fun. Just fun. I find that most people are happy that we're here to make their experience better. And so I look forward to them. Sometimes they're stressful, but I feel like some people by the end of it, especially if it's a long show and we've had to do many checks, I feel like I'm going to miss them when they're gone. I know that sounds crazy, but it's fun.
Yeah. You feel very connected to them after that, just because you've just worked through something hard online, and
it's a very intimate experience because you're coming into their living room and they're having conversations with you, and you don't know this person. And I always start with introducing myself. Not always. Sometimes we'll just be jumping right in, and I realize I feel like I know them, but they might not know me. And so we start with just an introduction and a little warm up. And so yeah, it's this interesting connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Shannon, thank you so much for coming. Another hour talking about participant prep. That was a lot of data. That was great. So
it's fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for showing up.
Awesome.
And so hopefully we'll every once in a while, I don't even know, probably do the same thing once every 6 months or whatever, and have Shannon come on, because in some ways it'll be different. I think that our participant prep process continues to evolve as well. Go ahead, Greg.
And I excuse me, I think that's one of the biggest problems that we face is actually getting the people to do this and to want to be professional looking and sounding. It's difficult. Yeah. And I think it's different also because I realized one of the things I was thinking about the other day was that for us, the hardest I've mentioned this a couple of times, some of the hardest people to work with are academics, government, scientists, tend to be really, really difficult. I was thinking about that over the weekend, and I realized that Shannon and I, and a lot of us here, are used to working on events. So we've spent the last decade or 2 decades working in Fortune 100. There's events, and you have staff, and you have playback and IMAG, and that's just our reality. And then I was looking at an event from a scientific symposium. Someone walking up to a podium, and they had a bunch of really ugly slides. And I realized that's not their experience. That's not their expectation. Our expectation is someone calling a run of show and doing a thing. And they just don't have that expectation that it's going to be that way. So I think that some of it is bringing people to something that they hadn't seen before. So when we say, the stage, because a lot of times they just rent a hotel room or they have a room in the building and they go and they turn on the podium and it's all self-run and they just have a conversation. And we're used to something different. And I think that's the challenge, is also just introducing them to the idea of a show, So anyway,
Shannon, thank you again. Big hands. And we will bring you back in. Hopefully sometimes you'll just come and join us in the panel, and you could probably just answer questions.
All right. I do like to watch. I do tune in and watch, but I'll jump in every once in a while.
I get comments about that. Your audio's off, or I'll get these comments in the back end of a text of like, you really need to fix that background. There was one point I think I had a little stretch on my thing, and she's like, you need to get rid of that shirt. so I get feedback. I get feedback relatively constantly. So Shannon is watching. She's not always on the panel. So anyway, she's much more ruthless with me than with our clients. And so anyway, thank you again, Shannon. And if you want to stick around, I'm going to answer. We didn't get to 7 questions. I'm going to lock the questions, but we're going to go ahead and answer those, and then we'll go into the post show, and I'll disappear. So, but we're going to go through these relatively quickly, and this is kind of a new way of me handling it. What I don't want to do is I really want the second hours to start on time in the future, but we may have this kind of thing, and then I have to get better at moving the conversation forward a little bit faster so that we don't have this. Anyway, go ahead. Next question, Bill.
Next question comes from Roscoe Jones. Without naming names, what makes for a quality fellow virtual crew member? And what have fellow crew done that bothered you or negatively affected the show? And consider bosses and clients fair game too. Feel free to just use the first part of the question if you need to.
I think that, well, go ahead, Stuart.
Somebody who will listen and adjust cameras and mics to be at this level is a quality virtual crew member. I've done a few different meetings for pre-production of some film stuff, and people aren't interested, and you end up getting tired because you're not able to hear their audio properly and you can't see them properly, and I want to swing a clue hammer.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I'd say people who are confident about what they know, but not immune to criticism. In fact, welcome it because they're always looking to improve. There is no such thing in production as perfection. So, learn what you know, do what you do, but, just take notes.
I mean, consistency is the biggest thing for me. Like, people who are going to be consistent, I know what to expect. Like that, as a producer, I just need to know what to expect. Like, if they say they're going to be somewhere, that they're there, if they can, plan out with me what needs to be planned out, and then they do what they said they were going to do. That's the biggest thing. And then for me, every person that I hire is better at what they do than I am. Whatever I hired them to do, that's why I hired them. So whether it's an editor or a sound designer or a sound person or a graphics person, I hire them, and I usually assume that they're going, I expect them to be better and be picking at things that I'm not picking at. And so, and be worried about things that I'm not worried about, or that I don't worry about as much. And so, I like complainers, actually. I like people who pick at things. I don't like them to complain during the event, but I like, like there's a certain level of, we just have to get it done. It's an imperfect situation, but I do like people who, if I feel like they just keep on saying everything's great, or they don't have a lot of feedback on what they didn't like, then I feel like we're never going to move forward. Like we're never going to move forward if they're not looking for what's the stretch all the time, and so I encourage it. I encourage, we've talked about RFI. Like I encourage people to pick at things often about what they don't like. I think that's I think a lot of people don't like that, but I feel like it's a really important part of evolution. They also have to be ready to know that, well, that's just not what we're going to get to today. Like we have to make decisions about, practical. And then they just have to be good team members. Like people who don't get along with the rest of the team, especially my teams, which usually are built around people that I've known for a while and people that I've brought in. If you don't get along with the rest of the team, you're probably not going to be here again. It's a pretty tight team. So you're either, if you're not getting along, it's not them. Yeah. So anyway, Roscoe.
What does getting along mean in the virtual? Are they in the room at some point in time with each other?
No, I mean, I think that in communication, we've had a handful of people who just, I get this consistent, like, oh, that person drives me crazy in the way that they email, text, communicate or not communicate, shift things around. And so, and I hear it from all the other team members, again, because I've created an environment where people feel relatively okay to complain, to pick at things, I get a lot of feedback, and that's important from a producer's perspective is making it safe for people to pick at things, not, like you. And, so I get a lot of feedback, and I ask people, like, so if someone's new, like, how's that working? Oh, we'll see, and I get different things, but you're constantly trying to refine that team, process. But people who are political generally never don't. People who are outright political in our meetings or around our crew generally won't come back. I don't care what the politics are. If they have a lot of politics that are talking about, you can talk to me about politics. I don't talk about it here. I'm happy to talk about it anywhere else. I come from a political family, so it's like a sport to talk about it. But it's poison for a team. There's nothing you can say, especially now that people aren't going to get upset about and then get distracted from getting done what they need to get done. And so, and generally people who talk a lot about things that aren't the production, especially when we're all in one room together. I don't say a lot about it, but it drives me absolutely crazy. As a producer, I just hate when people talk about other things. Like we're in production. Let's say we're in an actual room shooting. If we're on a break, I kind of need people to just be quiet, because I think they think that, well, I'm not working right now. But the problem is that they're distracting everybody else, with their conversation. So I just need them to sit there and wait for the best crew members I have will sit and either work on how to make something better that's been tickling their brain. And so they're working on something there and they're trying to figure something out. And there's really never a time when there's not something to do. So people just sitting there doodling about, and especially people talking about something other than the show on, in a work area. I won't say anything, but I probably won't hire them again. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Can I just ask, how do you rein in? A new person wants to show you what they know. I mean, they want to impress you, so they want to throw all this knowledge at you. How do you rein that in?
Now I will admit that I don't. The folks that I hire don't generally have anything to prove. like that they know what they know, and they are. But I think that. There's definitely just soft conversations. I'll usually have conversations, ex parte, somewhere else. What I don't like doing, I try to avoid putting people on the spot in front of other people as much as I possibly can. So if I do that, it means that they've really gone off, the rails. If I'm correcting someone in front of lots of other people, I feel like there's something really wrong and I'm trying to solve it because it is against everything that I want to do.
Praise publicly.
Correct privately.
Correct privately.
Yep. And so I work pretty hard at that. And people here even get feedback from me in Discord or on text or whatever, but I don't necessarily do that in public. So I'm pretty careful about that. But the other thing I do, you'll notice I do this here too, is change subject a lot. Things that, and sometimes I don't change the subject to work, but I change the subject. Me changing the subject randomly, you should usually, if you're on one of my teams, should know that whatever you were saying is not something I wanted to have in the conversation. And it might look like a joke. It might look like something else. It might look like if I completely change the subject while you're talking, it usually means that's me. Instead of saying, hey, let's stop talking about this, I will subvert the conversation to something else, as a producer. So, but if I do that often with somebody, then usually I'm not going to keep them. Next question.
Hector Rodriguez of Springfield, Virginia says, any recommendations for an under $300 mic for a clarinet, and notes mic stand versus clarinet attachable mics. And it's too bad Victor's not here today.
Yeah. Stuart.
As an ex-clarinet player, it depends on the frequency of the clarinet. If it's a standard B-flat clarinet, there's not a lot of bass, so you can get away with a lapel mic.
Go ahead, Mickey, and then Greg.
Yeah, exactly. It depends. Like if you're, say, in a live situation where you need it to be really isolated, then I would go on with a mic that's clipped onto the instrument. There's something like a Shure Beta 98, which I think is around $200, I think. And that's wired for XLR. But if you are in a situation where it's like, say, pre-recorded, where you can have more air in the recording, more space, natural room sounds coming in. If you have a nice room, then I would go with something on a stand. like a small diaphragm condenser or a large diaphragm that isn't too harsh on the high end, because you get a lot of uh, high end harshness with clarinet sometimes. So you want a mic that's sort of rounder sounding, maybe.
Go ahead, Greg.
One of the things, it depends on whether you're talking about live or you're talking about recording. It depends.
When someone says it depends, we all, as the panelists, have to go like this. You have to get it like, there we go. It depends.
Yeah. Live, of course, is probably a little tougher. One of the things that's key, I think, on the clarinet is the placement, and probably for studio recording, one of the favored placements that I know of is above the clarinet, about halfway down the instrument, and some of it never down by the bell. And some of the more preferred mics are Mickey's favorite 414 comes up a lot. Sennheiser MD421 comes up a lot. And then for live, I found this one that looks really, really interesting. It's made by Vega Music Tools. I'll drop it in the chat. But it installs in the, what do you call it? I know in a bassoon it's called a bocal. I don't think that's what it's called in a clarinet. But it installs inside their neck. Okay. And it sounds from the thing that the sample that they have on here, it sounds really, really, really great. So for under $300 though, I don't think you're going to get it. I mean, unless you just try some other ones. Oh, another one was the DPA 4011.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not under $300 either. So
go ahead, Stuart, real quick. We're going to move on.
Yeah, there's just one problem with using mics on stands, and it depends on whether the person playing the clarinet is for orchestra or if they are jazz musician, and whether they know to point the clarinet at the microphone, because jazz musicians especially will swing around and move the clarinet all over the place, and they'll be off mic very quickly.
Next question.
Leo Bindell of London is in with, I record my podcast on clean feed, so I have ISOs of each person. In mixing, I was wondering if I should space each person left to right in stereo.
Mickey?
Yeah, for a podcast, you usually want to keep it dead center mono, and unless you have content that's specifically in stereo. Because a lot of people, like, for example, sometimes they listen with just one earpiece on, or they have a stereo that's wired incorrectly, or stuff like that. So you want to be able to maintain mono compatibility with content like this that is distributed widely.
Greg?
Yeah, to me, generally anything that contains dialogue is center. Splitting dialogue left and right, to me, is just, it's too confusing, and it freaks my brain.
What's interesting is I've been playing a little bit with Atmos, and what's interesting is if you put all the sounds into the surround, it makes the center track with the person speaking even better. It kind of creates a space. This is something I was learning from someone that we'll get on here, just that you create a space for that voice to live with those sounds. So I play with surround sound. That's the thing. That's the next thing. You don't want to think limited to left and right. Just think of Atmos, and then you put everything in. But I would still keep everybody in the center. Jason and then Bill, real quick.
If for any reason you were worried, so first, everything Mickey said, absolutely vocal mono, period, no ifs, ands, or buts. If you want to get creative and you're worried about people in the panel talking over each other, do that in your monitor mix. Do not do that in your recording, because no matter how cool you think it is, it's going to annoy your audience.
Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
In all cases, except when you get explicit instructions to pan a source hard left or hard right. You will occasionally find that for people working on video and stuff like that. But without those explicit instructions, center.
Next question.
Tim Lewis of Springfield, Missouri says, looking to upgrade teleprompters, what is everyone's opinion of Prompter People's UltraFlex 12-inch iPad Pro will be used mostly in the field?
Go ahead, Jason.
It's great. It can get a little bit shaky if you are not absolutely dead on there. Other than that, beware of reversal, because that's the only issue.
I prefer monitors. Like I just don't. I like to feed monitors in, especially right now, because we need to be able to control them remotely, and so we have a lot of our teleprompting coming in over Zoom. So I don't like the iPad ones. I think that if you're already into using iPads for teleprompters, then it's probably fine. But I think that I tend to want to have a monitor there. Next question.
Hasmuk is in, our friend from Cape Town. With recording a medical town today, the 4x5 square room became quite hot. There is an AC, but with recording, we switched that off. Any suggestions for how to ventilate during production?
Go ahead, Stuart.
I would prefer to have the AC on and it baffled, but if you can't, grab a big flecky, as in the fold-out reflectors, and get an assistant just to waft it slowly. It'll move a lot of air without creating a lot of noise.
Go ahead, Greg.
The other old school way is turn it on and off. Leave it on.
Sounds like what they're doing now. Yeah.
Huh?
Sounds like what they're doing now.
Yeah. Well, that's the way to do it to me.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly what Greg said. Just be on the ball. Like, turn it on once you cut, off when you roll.
And the big thing is not use the room one. So the room one is designed to be low flow and just kind of in the background and just kind of keep the temperature. What I use is a space air AC that is got a big pipe that's in there. And it's high volt, 14,000 BTU or higher. And in a room that size, it'll cool it down in minutes. So you can take a small break, you let someone take a break, and then you cool it down to, 18 degrees Celsius, 17 degrees Celsius. It'll be chilly when it starts. Let them run for a half an hour. And also look at what is creating all that heat. Are you using hot lights, or do you have windows? Cover those up, so anything that's coming, any windows are heat generators, as are the lights, as are any other equipment. So how do you get that stuff out of there? But if it's just a human being, a human heater, as you call it, but the main thing is dunk it down, but you want to have something that has high. Now you remember that it either has to have a tank or a vent or somewhere to put the water, and then you have to have somewhere to exhaust it. Now, I even exhausted it. I'm horrible about using drop ceilings. I'm like somebody else's problem. I just stick it in the drop ceiling, shove all the hot air into the drop ceiling. It'll go somewhere in the building. It won't be here. So those are all some techniques to drop it down. And then the other thing is that if you need to ventilate it or to reduce it, you can use fans, these computer fans that are silent, and stick them in windows or locations to just pull air out of it. But the most successful thing has been high volume air AC that can do a room like that in a couple minutes. And then you just take a break. They all need a break. If they're going longer than a half an hour, let the speaker break anyway, and then come back to it cold again. Go ahead, Mickey, Jason, and Greg, real quick.
Yeah, regarding human heaters, get the unnecessary bodies out of the room.
Yeah.
Maybe place a monitor outside so people can watch it. Maybe clients could have their own client room or something so that they don't have to be in the actual shooting location.
Yep, absolutely. Jason, and then Greg.
Windows along those lines can make a huge difference. The fastest, cheapest, most unpermanent way to fix heat outside of a window is you get aluminum that is for restaurants, the wide sheets of aluminum, and put it on the outside of the window if you can. That's going to completely black it out, but also give the thermal coupling on the outside of the glass, not the inside.
Yep, that's great. Greg?
Okay, and going along with that, I would also say make sure you get a lot of insert shots or motion shots going away to give yourself places to cut.
Yep,
and get back in.
Yep. Next question.
Maggie Barton Baird of Edmonton says, have there been any virtual event platforms you've really loved using? I'm doing about a demo a week right now, and they're all starting to meld together.
Love using is a big word. I gave a fairly harsh tweet last night. Someone said, there's some guy that wants to do it. He was asking for a conference platform, and someone said, oh, you should talk to Alex. And I'm afraid that I just came back and just said, I don't believe, essentially, I don't believe in conferences anymore. Like I just feel like they're very past based. I think that, uh, I'm not, so I don't know. I know I'm not helping, but I think that we really want to keep thinking about conversations, what we're doing here. It doesn't have to be every day for a year, but it probably wouldn't hurt to think that way. For a lot of brands, having something that's a couple weeks in the evening or in the middle of the day or at lunchtime, a couple what we used to call brown bag lunches where you'd, have a conversation, but maybe it's an ongoing one every Wednesday or 3 days a week or every day at lunch. There's a way to have those conversations. But I really think that's the future, especially as I've seen what we've built here. I think the future is ongoing conversations, not events, Leo.
So I'm not answering the question at all, but I'm answering it in a different way, which is the bit that we keep going on about that's missing is the communication levels. And Wanda, I've used it a number of times now, and I really, really like it for that bit, the hallway track, they're being able to talk to different people at different times, and that combined with this is great, because I think what happens with this at the end of office hours when we have the after is it's very difficult. We're back in that problem of a direction control conversation like we're having, where you control it really well, Alex, works incredibly well, but it doesn't replace that interaction of people.
And we haven't, what's interesting, I'm trying to watch the behavior of it, is that we do breakout rooms and then no one goes into them. so it's one of those things that the people kind of want to stick around. And so they seem to want to have that general grouping, but I think that the reason I create the breakout rooms is so that we feel like if anyone wants to go have a conversation about something else, they can go, I'm going into this other room and go do that thing. I think building more culture around it, of people going into those other rooms and talking, I think is a big piece of it, to your point. Because I do think that the conversations that we have in those breakout rooms, either pre-show or post-show, are really fun and really useful, and just as good as this show. They're becoming just as good as the show that we do here, in pre and post. Go ahead, John.
This paradigm reminds me a lot of the story of the candlestick maker. Candlestick maker was there. He looked a lot like Chris Fenwick. His friend came in and he said, "Did you hear about this new thing? It's called electricity." He said, "Electricity. What are they going to do? Put wires everywhere?"
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, we're still in this kind of growth period where you have a lot of people grasping onto what they know, and they just want to, the team within the company, the event team that they're working with, the structure that people are used to is this: we're going to get everybody together for 3 days. We're going to get everybody together for 4 days. And yeah, that interaction, that loose interaction that in the hallway, happens, you need to have that happen because you only have 4 days together. Whereas, we have built up these relationships with each other over months, and it's not just this, it's Discord. It is, so Discord is kind of gluing a lot of the communication together. There's the post shows and the pre shows. There's actually whole different groups that come on different days. So, and again, I think that companies like, this is, just in case you're wondering, it's not very expensive to run this every day. It's time, but it doesn't cost, there's not a lot of out of pocket for me to do this. And I think that companies could, build a team, especially when I look back at event teams have the budgets that event teams have for a lot of these companies. They're big, like compared to what it would cost to properly equip people and do something every week or and again, I think that, and I will admit that I've been proposing daily sessions with developers or with other folks to companies for the last decade, and they just want to bring everybody into a hotel room, because it's just what they know. And I think that another year of this, which I think it'll be another year, by the end of this year, I think that with what you're doing, Leo, with what John Preto's doing, with what Grant's doing, with what I'm doing, what Sky's doing, what Doug's doing, with what Blue and Jeff are doing, a bunch of us that are about to, I think that we're about to break through some kind of barrier and when that turns, it's over. Like this is going to be one of those things, like it's been building up slowly for 10 years. Then it got shifted forward. And then as those success points really ring out and start to stretch out and people start building events, that are way bigger than what you could put back into the physical world. As those events start hitting, as more people attend those events, I think that you end up, but I don't think that any of the event platforms that I've seen so far are building towards that. They're trying to reproduce the past. You know, they're trying to like, how do we be the candle maker? I'm going to use that a lot, you know, like because that is such a great metaphor of what's happening is people just want to keep on building candles. Sky and then Leo.
Middle management wants security because that's what they've got their MBA for.
Mm-hmm.
And so risk aversion, so what you've established, I think a key element foundationally is trust. And I don't know how to do that other than time. And you've established rules. You've given us rules. You've said live up to them or leave. And it was very simple. And there are those that haven't wanted to live up to them and they've left. So again, so the word trust comes into this and fear.
And it's hard. I mean, like I wouldn't say that you could necessarily do what we're doing here, because what we've built here is almost impossible to build. Like I don't know if you could do it again. It would take an enormous amount of work for a company to do it. To rebuild what we built here, but I do think you can build meaningful events that happen every week, every day, you know, that type of thing. Go ahead, Leo.
Well, the other thing, okay, value is the other question. In World War II, you traded chocolate bars as a way of a means of barter tokens. So you've created a value. Knowledge, education is a value as also.
Yeah, I agree.
The two things, one is the other analogy, very similar one, which is, you know, the Ford said, you know, if he had asked the people at the time what would they want, they would have wanted faster horses. Right. And that was the difference. But the thing I would say is the big thing why people are asking about this is all about the tech of the presenters. And that's the big difference which you talked about earlier today, I still believe, because people are still seeing really bad tech. And that's why they think they want this. They're looking. They think the platform is going to improve it, and it's not the platform that improves it. And you've had a whole second hour about why it's not the platform that makes it better.
It's the secret sauce. I'll flat out tell everyone. Secret sauce is participant prep. It's sending out kits. It's the good and the thing is Ethernet and a headset mic. So for $50 per person, you can transform most of your event. And then if you add another $350 on top of that and get a good light and a good and a good camera and an earpiece and all those other things, you end up with really, if you look at the Inscopic event, it's not perfect, but you look at just about every speaker is very listenable. Just about every speaker you can look at. You know, are their colors perfect? No. Are there whatever? But it's a leaps and bounds better than almost everything else that we have been able to show publicly. But we've done lots of events like that where we send everybody a kit, everybody sounds good, everybody looks good. Then you tie it in with a little bit of a good start, a good end, some structure around it. And you end up with something that people are like, yeah, that's really good. We could do that all the time. And the key is, but that you have to, like, we just had a meeting with someone I don't have the choice to turn down, and they don't want to send out kits. And I was just like, yeah, like this is going to be, look, and it's going to be really, it could be really good, and it'll just be messy, and but so much of Zoom fatigue is audio. Like, it is just audio. Zoom fatigue is all about everyone looking. They think it's because we're looking at each other, or we're looking at ourselves, or we're on stage all the time, but it really is just bad audio. You can't understand what anybody is saying. Last question, and then we got to go.
Moving to A. Mitchell's finishes us up for today with an hour with Dan Dugan being on Wednesday the 13th at 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard. Would it be worthwhile having a post show on that day after 10 a.m. Pacific, or doing it as part of an extended post show viewing party? Any interest in this idea from the attendees here? And he's got a link to the event.
I'm just going to get Dan to come on to the show with us. So I don't need to do a post show and somebody else's presentation of Dan. We'll have a much better conversation with Dan when we get him on. I've met Dan often enough that I'm almost certain that he'll come on. And I'll make sure he has a good kit. But yeah, I'm not worried about that. I'd rather. I look at great people that we want to see of how do we encourage them to join us, not how do we watch a tired presentation platform and then talk about it later.
Dan loves talking about what he does. So this will not be a big ask.
Yeah, he's great. he's fantastic. So I'd rather have him in our pipeline. So that's kind of where we'll probably end up going. That's it. A little longer. This is a different way of handling too many questions. I just don't want to run. I felt like it was not. It's been building up that I've been allowing the questions to roll over. And I just feel like it's not fair to the speaker who came in. I usually only let it really roll over when I'm speaking, but I let it roll over on Saturday, and I was like, I have to figure out some other way to structure this. So, this is our experiment with that. And I also have to be more disciplined, or we all have to be more disciplined about answering questions faster and cutting them off. I think the thing is that people have gotten much better about asking questions, and we've gotten much more comfortable about answering them as a conversation, which makes a good show. But we have to speed up the pace a little bit. So we'll work on that. Keep on tightening. Anyway, so thank you all. Thank you all to the panelists who came in. Thank you all to the attendees who ask all the great questions. It's, again, crazy show that's all based on just a bunch of us showing up and talking. So it's an odd format, but my favorite at this point. So it's good seeing all of you. And I'm going to go ahead and jump into the post show here in just a second. And so we'll see some of you there, and then we'll go from